Political Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yamina Revolution, and the big guy, Don Corleone Biden himself, them pardon the underboss Hunter. But he's actually giving himself a pardon. Before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. What a Sammy the John Gotti of politics, Joe Biden, is really trying to give himself a pardon. The whole world know it. He's admitting to his crimes in Ukraine through Hunter. But let's get into that. He's starting a political firestorm because a lot of Democrats are pissed that he done it because he makes everything Trump said right. Trump said the political system was rigged and the DOJ would target political opponents. Well, if Biden is saying that's what they were doing, then Trump was right when he said they done it to him.
Joe Biden has announced that he will be pardoning Hunter Biden, his son, after he was found guilty of both gun charges and tax evasion charges. Now, this is after Joe Biden himself said that he would respect due process, he would respect the decisions of the jury, he would allow the process to flow, and whatever happens, happens.
Will you accept the jury's outcome, their verdict, no matter what it is?
Yes.
And have you ruled out a pardon for your son?
Yes. And I am satisfied that I'm not going to do anything.
He set Hunter up.
I will do that.
You see, he set his son up. He had no choice because he set Hunter up to be his bag man. He had to get somebody close that he trusted to run this Biden crime operation while he's in office. Somebody that will go to the places he wanted them to go to. He had no choice. Pardoning Hunter is pardoning himself. And now people is waiting to see if he's going to pardon his brother. Because what he just did is, well, they can get his brother too, because all the crimes Hunter committed, his brother committed too. And if he pardoned his brother next, all hell gonna break loose, because now it definitely means they've been running a scam.
No, I'm not pardoning him.
Is there any possibility that the president would end up pardoning his son?
No. So I've answered this question before. It was asked of me not too long ago, a couple of weeks ago, and I was very clear, and I said no.
It's still a no. It's still a no.
It will always be a no.
It's still a no. It will be a no. It is a no, and I don't have anything else to add. Will he pardon his son? No.
This is some small issue, ladies and gentlemen, because if Hunter Biden went to his hearing sentence in December, he would have been facing a maximum of 25 years. Now, no one believes that he would have actually served 25 years in prison, but he would have served some time. And now Joe Biden has made it so not only will Hunter Biden avoid time in prison, but he will avoid accountability altogether. Now, isn't this the exact type of behavior that liberals claim Trump was capable of doing and would do if the circumstances were reversed? Didn't liberals say that if Trump won, it would be he who stepped on democracy and due process and would use his political influence to get outcomes favorable to him, his family, and only his supporters? Y'all don't got nothing to say about this? Now, if this was you or me or our families, we would be getting our affairs in order because we would be going to jail in about 2 months like Hunter Biden was about to do. We were convicted of what he was convicted of. But once again, liberals get caught projecting all the hypocritical shenanigans that they are actually guilty of committing. What's crazy about this is that he is justifying his...
This is not about what Hunter was convicted of. This is about what he wasn't convicted of. You see, Joe Biden did not give him a pardon for what he was convicted of. He got him a pardon for crimes he wasn't convicted of and unknowingly may have committed, going all the way back to 2014 when Barack Obama put this clown Joe Biden in control of the Ukraine money laundering scheme. Oh, it's all coming out. No, he didn't pardon him just for the gun case and the tax evasion. Oh, hell no. Oh, not just that. Everything that he could have thought about doing, he pardoned him for. But a pardon for Hunter is a pardon for himself.
His decision to pardon his own son of crimes he was absolutely guilty of because he believes the process was tainted by raw politics. Now, once again, I'm not a Trump fan, ladies and gentlemen. But what happened over the last 3 to 4 years with all the raw politics that interfered with the Trump convictions? Because that's all that was the weaponization of Biden's Justice Department against a political opponent. So in such a situation, would Trump be wrong if he pardoned himself? Or a better question would be, would liberals complain if Trump pardoned himself because of the political interference like Biden is doing right now for Hunter? Of course they would. Just another example of rules for thee, but not for me when it comes to these corrupt, morally bankrupt politicians.
Salute, Queen.
So promise to put the law before family.
I said I abide by the jury decision. I will do that, and I will not pardon him.
Letting the world know that he will not wipe away the decision of 12 of his son's peers.
Was asked directly, and he has said he wouldn't pardon his son if he gets convicted.
Let's wait and see what happens if he loses.
Yeah, but he said it.
He's going to get pardoned by his dad. There's no question about that.
The president has ruled out pardoning his son.
Major commitment from the president, accepting the outcome of the trial and also pledging not to pardon his son.
So the challenge for him is really to continue to live up to his values when it was really personal, and he did that today.
It seems like a pretty normal, straightforward answer, but it takes new weight when we see what Trump is saying about the outcome of his trial, what we're hearing from other Republicans who say they don't accept the jury's verdict here in New York.
The contrast is profound. To sit there and say, well, I'm not going to intervene in the legal process, and I wouldn't pardon my son. One side, Democrats and Joe Biden protecting the justice system. And on the other, Republicans and Trump protecting Trump.
A current president of the United States.
Look at all this shame. Look at all this shame. This was them patting themselves on the back for being so moral, for being stand-up, honorable men and women, for being above party, for being all about America, you know, hoping to get votes, saying the other guy is a convicted criminal who used the justice system to help himself and help his family and target his political opponents. Well, that's what they was doing. And since they lost, that's all the hell with the justice system. It's corrupt. And they target their political enemies. That is what Joe Biden is saying now.
So much respect for the law that he has said he would not pardon his son. I mean, again, it's all about the contrast.
President Biden saying, I will respect whatever this jury decides.
Donald
Trump after he's convicted on 34 counts, saying the entire system is rigged against him.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. We got to talk about more reactions to Joe Biden lying to the American people about pardoning his son, Hunter Biden. Okay, Joe Biden came out and said under no circumstances would he pardon Hunter because nobody is above the law. Turns out that Joe Biden was lying to the American people. He didn't really mean that. He intended to pardon Hunter the whole time. Okay, and now you have Democrats out here trying to spin this in ways that are really, really, really embarrassing, especially considering how you have some Democrats that went on record to back up Joe Biden's claims that he would not pardon his son, Hunter Biden. And it's just not going well for them when they get confronted with their own words, to say the least. Take a look.
In July of 2023, just after that plea deal fell through, this is what you said. I want to watch.
Do you think a pardon for his son would be a mistake?
Yes, and I don't think there's any chance that President Biden is going to do that, unlike his predecessor, who pardoned all of his friends and anyone who had any access to him. And I think you see that in this case, where he kept on, and Merrick Garland kept on, a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney to investigate the president's son. If there is not an indication of the independence of the Department of Justice beyond that, I don't know what we could look for.
What does that feel like, watching yourself back then, reassuring people that Biden was not going to issue a pardon for his son?
Yeah, and I think that if that plea agreement and that plea deal had gone through, there would be no pardon. That was a satisfactory outcome.
It had already fallen through.
That only was. Sorry?
When you reacted, this was when the deal had fallen through.
You know,
See, now you heard that.
Okay. I ain't trying to go with a talking point that they've been saying. They saying, well, since the plea agreement fell through, because at first he had got a good deal, and then the politicalization came, so it left him no choice. And she just told him no. But what you said was after the plea agreement already fell through. This is crazy. Yeah, they got to eat their own words because they've been lying to people the whole time, saying, look, Trump is a dictator, and this is what he'll do. And we've been telling y'all, they are the ones doing all of this. They got themselves.
Democrats are definitely not having a good time trying to defend Joe Biden on national television. They're coming up with all types of crazy excuses for why he lied, and we probably will talk about those excuses in another video. But on this video, I really want to focus on the fact that you have people that are just flat out turning on Joe Biden, right? Biden supporters saying, no. This is not okay, right? Like, no, you cannot do this.
Because they know what time it is. A lot of Democrats, we're going to play that. We're going to get to all that. They already know he opened up Pandora's box. They know this is the stab in the back to them because, Joe, you old bastard, you leaving. Trump coming back in office. So you're going to let him have 4 years where he ain't got to worry about running no more. And now you telling him that he can write it because you done it for your son. Oh, he can pardon all those people from January the 6th. Oh, yes, he can. And people are telling him to do it. He can pardon everybody for crimes they finna commit. You did it, Joe.
That you have some type of moral
gave
high
Trump
ground,
a blank check, do whatever the hell he
Party
want.
has tried to market themselves as the party of moral high ground, right? They tried to sell to the American people that they're better than Trump from a moral perspective, okay? And that's essentially what Kamala Harris's whole campaign was based off of. This idea that, well, Kamala Harris, she's just morally superior to Trump. Therefore, you shouldn't care about the economy. You shouldn't care about the border. You shouldn't care about crime. You shouldn't care about all the issues. No, Kamala Harris is just a better person than Trump. Therefore, you should vote for her. And I've told you guys before, and I'll tell you again, Democrats, they are not morally superior to Trump, right? They're not better people than Trump. They don't have better character than Trump. Democrats are some of the most corrupt individuals on the planet. They just go about it in a very sneaky way, right? They're very, very, very sneaky about their corruption. And then they want to point the fingers at other people because they are projecting, right? That's what the Democrat Party does, okay? Everything they accuse Trump of doing, that's actually what they're doing, okay? So with that being said, again, you have some Biden supporters come out here and call him BS. Like this guy, Charlie Sykes. He says, smart person texts me, quote, Joe Biden has just removed the issue of pardons from the political arena for the next 4 years. And Trump probably once again can't believe his own dumb effing luck at this point. Sadly, I think he's right. Nate Silver says, I discussed here how I voted for Harris despite feeling like Democrats indulge in a lot of bad behavior that the voters were rational to publish. After the White House lying about the Hunter Biden pardon, I'm not sure how much more I can tolerate. Chris Saliza says, a colossally selfish decision that will allow every Trump supporter to note that Democrats say one thing and do another. Well, I mean, we've been noting that for a long time, right? This is not a new thing, okay? We all been pointed out. This is just one of the most obvious examples because, again, Biden doesn't care. All he cares about is himself and making sure his son doesn't go to prison before he dies, right? That is what Joe Biden is worried about. I mean, this guy issued a blanket pardon for any crimes that he may have committed, even going back to 2014. I mean, this is basically when Hunter Biden started to work with Burisma, right? Joe Biden's essentially
even crimes he didn't know he was committing. See, this is about protecting Joe. See, some stuff Hunter could say, hey, I didn't know what was going on, Pop. I just was telling you, told me to meet with these people. Oh, my son never knew he was committing a crime when I told him to meet with those illegal people from those different states. Joe know what he's doing.
Actually admitting guilt, saying, he may have committed some crimes, right? But hey, I'm going to issue him a pardon so that people like Kash Patel can't seek justice against him. Susan Glasser says, noting that Biden here writes of telling the truth to the American people while not explaining how he lied to them before he said he would not pardon his son. Well, Democrats don't feel the need to explain anything, right? They don't, because they think that they are so morally superior to Trump that you can't judge them when they're wrong, right? When they get caught not adhering to the values that they claim they believe in. So yeah, you have people who are extremely Trump deranged. Individuals like, for example, Joe Walsh, he actually went on MSNBC and turned on Biden and went off on what Biden did. Take a look.
See, I told you so. They're all like that. So the next time any of us complain about anything Trump does, this pardon is just deflating.
You can't say nothing.
For those of us who have been out there for a few years now yelling about what a unique threat Donald Trump is, for Joe Biden to do something.
Trump just rubbing his hands like Birdman right now. I need that picture. He just rubbing his hands like Birdman. You just gave him a Christmas came early for Trump. Oh, thank you, Joe Biden. You senile old fool. What did you just do to America? You proved Trump right. You said the DOJ politically targets people because they done it to your son. Wow, that's what Trump been saying. Y'all said he was lying. No, the president of the United States said he's telling the truth because it happened to his family. That's why these Democrats are shocked. Not only did you back up what Trump been saying, but now he can blanket pardon January the 6th and everybody else because what you did.
Something like this. Trump, nobody's above the law, we've been screaming. Well, Joe Biden just made clear his son Hunter is above the law. Donald Trump lies every time he opens his mouth, we've been screaming. Joe Biden repeatedly lied about this. The politicization of the justice system, Donald Trump and his people have been screaming. Well, that's exactly what Biden said here.
Joe, is this a politics of purity? I mean, we had Donald Trump pardon Sheriff Joe Arpaio during his term, and there wasn't a lot of hue and cry about that. I mean, this is a
this is where they're not going to get away with that. They're going to say, well, Donald Trump pardoned his son-in-law's father. He didn't pardon him for Trump. He didn't. The man had been in jail and during his time. His man wasn't tied to Trump. The man didn't know nothing that could give up Trump. Bill Clinton pardoned his half-brother. He didn't pardon for himself. The man was locked up for drug trafficking, selling to undercover. He didn't protect himself with that pardon. You see, Joe Biden is these people need to stop this BS. Joe Biden is pardoning himself. Hunter was the bag man. America need to understand that. Joe Biden is pardoning himself. And he told Hunter in the beginning, I got you. We're going to make sure. Imagine just being able to do whatever you want because you know you're going to get a pardon. That's why Hunter was so cocky, so arrogant, so egotistical. On video, smoking crack, weighing crack, selling crack with prostitutes. This man recording himself and posting it. This man put on laptop making videos because he knew his ass was never going to get in trouble because Joe Biden told him, don't worry about it. Just bring in the money. And one thing Hunter did do, he brought the money in.
Father who saw his first wife killed, his daughter killed in a car crash, his two young sons survive. One goes on to have real difficulties with addiction. Another dies because of cancer. This is a family that's really troubled. I mean, yes, he said he wasn't going to do this, but did anyone ever believe that that was the case? I mean, I would have put good money on this happening.
Did anybody ever believe him? Damn, you're saying the president was a liar? You knew he was a liar? And you see how they trying to shape it? Oh, he had people in the past, family members die. And he been through some hard times. Son addicted to, a man locked up so many black people because they had crack problems. And he laughed on TV about it and said they wouldn't get no probation. 5 years mandatory. The hell with Joe Biden and his crackhead son. They preach to the choir. Oh, just some hard times. Oh, man, who the hell you talking to, lady? Who the hell you talking? Hey, protest. I ain't seen the Biden family protest in front of no prison saying justice for Hunter. No, they just rig it for themselves. This is disgusting, man.
Are many people going to be surprised that a father who is also the president would do this for his son?
I don't know that people will be surprised because you're right. Joe Biden repeatedly said he wouldn't do this. So he repeatedly lied. But this just furthers the cynicism that people have about politics. And that cynicism strengthens Trump because Trump can just say, I'm not a unique threat. Everybody does this. If I do something for my kid, my son-in-law, whatever, look, Joe Biden does the same thing. I get it, but this was a selfish move by Biden, which politically only strengthens Trump.
He
It's
just
just
destroyed the Democratic
deflating.
Party leaving.
Yeah, so
He done destroyed the Democratic Party. Joe Biden holding a grudge. He did this on purpose. He holding a grudge. He destroyed him. They're not gonna be able to say nothing to Trump about nothing. His entire presidency behind Joe Biden. You can't say shit. Joe, and when Trump come out and say he was targeted by the Justice Department, they can't say he's lying and he's being unpatriotic and being un-American. Joe Biden just said that is what happens at the Justice Department. That's why these Democrats are pissed. Because Joe Biden opened up Pandora's box. You pardon your son. We don't want to hear nothing about Trump pardons. You just pardoned your bag man. We know you enrich your family. We know this. This ain't about, oh, my son was just going through some stuff. Oh, man, that is your bag man and the tax evader. Come on, man. That Ukraine. And this is what's so disgusting. We figure out World War III behind these clown scams in Ukraine. That wasn't no game. They enriching themselves while the world is on the line. Man, people should be locked up for that shit.
Love how Joe Walsh just completely ignored the sad sop story that the MSNBC host tried to put out there in order to deflect criticism away from Joe Biden, right? He just completely ignored it, right? It was like, no, Joe Biden lied, right? You don't understand. Joe Biden lied, because Joe Biden lied, we can't take the high road anymore, right? We can't claim the high ground, the moral high ground, and we can't boo-hoo and cry about Trump and when he does things that we feel is corrupt, because our party is corrupt, right? Again, it's hilarious. Absolutely hilarious to see what's happening. What's also hilarious is to see some Democrats who are trying to mental gymnastics their way through defending what Joe Biden did get absolutely curb stomped on national television by Republicans like Scott Jennings, which is exactly what's going to happen to this propagandist, Miss Karen Finney, on CNN. Let's get into it.
There are Democrats saying they're not happy that President Biden made this decision.
Yeah, well, tough. The president went ahead and did what he thought was right for him and to protect his son.
Joe Biden is leaving office making the strongest possible case for Donald Trump that anybody could possibly make it, and that's that our government and our justice system is of, by, and for the elites and nobody else. He ran to banish Trumpism from our political system in this country, and he has left it politically and now institutionally the strongest possible political force in this country. It is a complete and utter failure by the head of the Democratic Party and the president of the United States. Never again do I want to hear, oh, Donald Trump's a liar. You can't believe anything he says. Donald Trump will abuse his power. Donald Trump will only use the system to benefit himself and his family and so on and so forth. Never again. I have one question for Karen, and that is, why did he need an 11-year blanket pardon going back to 2014 when Joe Biden was the vice president? We are sitting on the biggest cover-up of who knows what crimes.
Biggest cover-up and scandal. Why? Because what they're covering up is the reason why we're at World War III. 2014, understand what happened. They overthrew the democratically elected president in Ukraine. They put the Nazis in power. That's when the scam began. Joe Biden, why did you go? If you don't know what your son was doing, what you said, why did you go back to the day the crime started? You see, right in people's face. They covering up their crimes and just looking at people and think people stupid and talking, well, Trump, him and his family made some money. And people said this. They always brought up Trump. And I said, well, Trump got Trump Tower, Trump Golf Course. But they might be fudging some numbers. We know Trump business, what it is. You said it's a crappy business, whatever. How was the Bidens making all of their money? Huh? Why did Joe Biden's granddaughter get money from Chinese people? Why did they have 16 different shell companies? What was the Biden's family business? Joe. And selling American power overseas. That was their business. Hey, you can't be doing that. Hell no, you can't do that. And that's why he pardoned his son, because you can go to federal prison for doing that.
And Joe Biden, amazingly, knows exactly, roughly, when it started. He knows just about when it all started. He's leaving office in complete and total disgrace. He is a liar. And there is no other way to spin this today. This has nothing to do with Trump and everything to do with the character of Joe Biden.
That Republicans have
facts. Yo, Scott Jennings spitting out hot fire. He's not holding back. I love it. But he's right, though. Joe Biden, basically, by pardoning Hunter all the way back to 2014, just a blanket slate. Like, Hunter could have murdered somebody. He could have killed somebody during that time period. Joe Biden's like, I don't care, right? We're gonna wipe it away. Okay, I don't want my son in jail. But we all know why he did that. He did that because he knows that Hunter was breaking the law and that he was acting as a foreign agent.
But also remember, Hunter was human trafficking, underage people, women from Ukraine, all what European women, all kind of the Mann Act. Hunter was supposed to be. They talking about P. Diddy. What? They ain't got nothing on Hunter. Diddy would have said, "Boy, you wild," when he seen how Hunter be living. Are you kidding me? And that ain't no game. And Hunter talking about the P. Diddy tapes. What a Hunter Biden tapes is something else too. And guess what? We can see pictures all over the fucking internet. Those are real pictures. They saw that's Russian misinformation. Oh, bullshit. This clown put it all on a laptop.
When he did not register as a foreign agent while conducting those business dealings overseas in Ukraine and China, and Joe Biden was the big guy, and Joe Biden benefited from it, right? So him pardoning Hunter is almost like him trying to cover himself. He's not just covering his son, but he's covering himself, okay? The whole Biden crime family doesn't need to be investigated anymore, right? I'm sick of the investigations. They need to be held accountable. But again, Democrats don't believe in accountability for themselves. They don't. And that's what Joe Biden is trying to do here. He's trying to escape accountability. In fact, I would go as far as to say that this whole plot to charge Hunter Biden with these lesser crimes, okay, tax evasion and the gun charges, was just a plot to get Hunter Biden off for his business dealings in Ukraine, right? It was an excuse for Biden to issue a blanket pardon, okay? A blanket pardon that just happened.
See, the plan was to get Trump indicted like they did, but to get his ass locked up or so he couldn't get elected and say, see, we both of them are facing justice now. Kamala get in. They still was going to pardon Hunter and say Trump and them had targeted him, but Trump was going to be fucked off. It all backfired. Trump won, so Biden got to pardon his son and give everybody else pardon. His brother is next to get a pardon because his brother is also neck deep in this shit.
This happens to cover all the things that people actually really care about, the crimes that people actually really want to see the Biden family be held accountable for. This is corruption right in your face, right in your face.
Been for years now trying to attack the president himself, go after his family. And when you have someone who literally ran their campaign on retribution, on the idea of I will be your retribution and getting back at his enemies, I would imagine, obviously I haven't spoken to the president about this, but I would imagine the president took a look at this and said, I want to make sure this is ironclad, that there is nothing that can be done to circumvent what I'm going to do to protect my son and to try to take the target off of his back once and for all. So that's my reading of it. But again, I think that the hypocrisy here, it is astounding. I mean,
don't forget, Hunter Biden laptops say 10% for the big guy. The big guy get 10%, and they always tried to shut down who the big guy was. They had his brother name on there. They had his wife. They had his granddaughters. They had his daughter-in-laws. They had everybody's name on there. But then they wouldn't reveal who the big guy was that got 10%. Who would Hunter make sure gets 10% out of everything he make? Hunter also complained that he tired of having to pay all the family bills, meaning everybody's bills come out of accounts that Hunter manages. Biden, Joe never paid a bill the last 20. Hunter was doing it all for everybody. He was running the Biden crime family for the big guy, but they won't ever say who the fuck the big guy is. And they won't ever say, why the hell was all these Romania and Ukraine and China, why was they giving y'all millions of dollars? What were you providing, Hunter? The Democrats don't want to talk about that.
Donald Trump has said and done things, said things and done other things. And again, he's a convicted felon himself. He has used his power to benefit his friends, his wealthy allies. In this instance, we're talking about a man who decided to.
Y'all said Joe didn't do that, though. You see, once they say, but Trump, Oh, but you saying Joe did do that? Joe, oh, this is crime. You saying Joe and Hunter was doing shit to enrich the Bidens? Well, damn, like what? In Ukraine? Oh my goodness. We had World War III behind that shit. Why did they overthrow the president? Huh? Why did Joe Biden say you ain't getting that $1 billion loan unless you fire the prosecutor who was looking into my son? On tape, he said that, and he bragged. And they told him, you ain't the president. He said, I'm the one running this. He was right. Barack had put him in power. But they act like that's not on tape. Oh, that's on tape. That's our money he threatening. That's a federal crime. That's all Trump was saying that he wanted on record. That's a crime. You can't hold back taxpayer money for a country to file a prosecutor who is investigating your son crimes, but he did it. All of this, Hunter's getting a pardon for right now.
Take care of his son after years of unrelenting attacks.
You know what I find to be hilarious about this whole butt Trump thing? And again, Democrats just don't get this. They don't understand this. You're marketing your party as better than Trump, right? Your whole pitch for Kamala Harris is that she's morally superior to Trump. Her character is better than Trump. Don't pay attention to the actual results because we can't really win on the results. Pay attention to the intangibles. When you come out here and you basically try to say, well,
y'all don't understand. Trump was impeached behind this. The whole impeachment was BS. Now they're saying it was true. You pardoned your son for what Trump was impeached for. Trump brought up Ukraine. And he told Zelensky he want that Ukraine dirt brought to the light. They impeached him. And Trump was saying, y'all not getting no weapons unless you bring. Trump didn't say make nothing up. Trump said we want the Burisma shit. He was impeached for that, saying, oh, you working for Russia. But now Joe Biden is pardoning his son. See, this is crazy. They gotta take the impeachment process back because he should have never been impeached. Because now Joe Biden is pardoning his son for what Trump was saying was happening in Ukraine.
It's okay that Joe Biden did this because look at Trump. What you're saying is that you're not better than Trump. So if you're not better than Trump, then what is the selling point? Right? You guys remember it got to the point in Kamala's campaign where they basically were saying, well, she doesn't have to be better than Hitler. Why is it that Kamala Harris has to be better than Hitler? Right? Why does she have to be held to a higher standard than Trump? That's the argument they were making. And they're essentially making this same argument right now. But yet your whole pitch is that you're better than Trump. If your pitch is that you're better than Trump, when it comes to these things, you can't come out and then say, well, why are we being held to a higher standard than Trump? Well, your only selling point that you're putting out there to the American people is that you're supposed to be better than Trump.
Trump did not sell out America to make his money. That's what the Bidens did. Trump wanted to put golf courses in Trump hotels. Oh, how could you want some golf courses in North Korea? Why are you trying to put Trump hotels in Saudi Arabia? Oh, that's none of your business. Get you some golf courses to sell. Get you some hotels that's jumping. Hater, don't sell out America. That's what Joe Biden was doing. All we asked him was, what were y'all trying to give for those millions? They don't want to talk about it. Trump will tell you, hey, man, I want to put some Trump towers over there. That's what I was trying to do. They don't want to talk about that. Biden crime family is selling out America cushy deals for Ukraine.
On these things. It doesn't make sense. It makes zero sense whatsoever. But the reality is that, again, they're not morally superior to Trump. They don't have better character than Trump. These people are the most corrupt individuals on the planet.
I don't blame him.
You guys can spend all day long trying to spin this, that this is Donald Trump's fault, that this is somehow caused by Donald Trump. Oh, he's appointing the wrong people. Oh, he did it. Oh, this is the worst possible thing a president could possibly do to his party and to the country, to sit for a year and say, I will not do this. I will not do this. The rule of law is sacred. We have to respect the justice system. Juries, we have to respect juries. We have to respect the guardrails and the norms of our democracy. These people are liars. Inflation is transitory. Afghanistan, it's a success. The border is secure. Robert Hur is a liar. The videos are cheap fakes. Biden has a cold. He'll never drop out. Oh, I'll never pardon Hunter. It's all a lie. It is all a grift. Every American, except the most partisan brain rotted people are going to be outraged by this today. He is going to leave off. You think 39% job approval is bad? Just you wait. Just you wait. He's disgraced today. Outrageous. Are you fine with the lying? Are you fine with him sitting before the election all year and lying to the American people? Are you fine with the lying about it?
I don't think that he was lying. I think he made a decision after the fact and decided this was the right thing for him and for his family. Period. Full stop. Donald Trump decided that it was okay to pardon
Joe Biden, Karine Jean-Pierre. How many minutes of tape do we have of both of these people telling the American people this will not happen? It's
But Donald Trump, there was no Donald Trump when y'all started y'all damn Ukraine scheme in 2014. Man, the man was making money on TV. See, Trump is a convenient boogeyman for these people that they've been making a lot of, man. That's all stopping now. Joe Biden has shown himself in the Biden crime family. That just was a tag people were saying. No, it's real now. Because now he's pardoning his son going back to 2014 when everybody say the crime started in Ukraine.
I mean, we could play it all morning. It's a lie, and it's a lie to benefit his own family, and that's all that it is. And everybody who went on TV and said, oh, look how he's the modern George Washington. He's drained every ounce of credibility from every surrogate. If Karine Jean-Pierre had an ounce of self-respect, she'd get off the plane in Africa today where they're going so he can avoid the press and resign. He's drained all of her credibility, and everybody else who's defended this, it's draining.
Yeah, I mean, the whole media, right? They've lost their credibility. Okay, and then they boohoo whine and cry. Why nobody believe us? Why nobody care about what we say? Why is Joe Rogan so popular? Elon Musk, influencers, right? This is why they do that. Okay, they've lost credibility, defending Democrats no matter what, instead of actually holding Democrats to the standard that Democrats want to hold everybody else to. But again, when it comes to Democrats, rules for thee, not for me. We can do whatever we want because we're Democrats. Okay, and if you judge us, if you actually criticize us for not living up to the values that we claim we believe in, you're the problem. Okay, you are the issue, not us. Yeah, Democrats are not having a good time on national television, and you're seeing some of them already come out and turn on Joe Biden due to just the very bad position that he put his party in. And any Democrat, again, defending this, it really shows you just how much of an actual shield they are. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative.
Biden's son. The laundering scheme that's
punk rock.
Not everyone. You have warmongers like John Bolton, of course, Yosemite Sam, who's come out and says this is a terrible move.
Sure.
You know,
well, we're going to talk about who's afraid and who's not. I was explaining to my son over the weekend what it means that it's punk rock. I don't think people use that anymore.
No.
It's like, what would you think that punk rock means? It's like stick it to the man type, right?
Yeah, you're a rebel.
When I say punk,
it's anti-authoritarian. Right?
It's exactly that.
That's the idea, is that you're standing up to authoritarianism.
Let us know how you feel about that.
Yeah, we got a lot of news to get to today. So welcome in. Let us know where you're joining us from. Thank you for allowing us to take a week off and spend time with the family. Hope you guys had a wonderful week as well. If you're in the United States, spending time with your family over the Thanksgiving break and dealing with all of the pumpkin pie and turkey and all the fixins.
We dealt with it.
We did our first.
So you say.
We did our first deep fried turkey this year, so that was a lot of fun.
It was adventurous.
It was delicious. All right, let's get to the news, shall we? Well, the Hunter Biden pardon has nothing to do with Hunter Biden. It has everything to do with Joe Biden. Pay attention to this. In the biolabs and the money laundering scheme that's been run through Ukraine. If you're wondering why Hunter Biden was pardoned in the way that he was, then you need to follow the money right to Ukraine. So the timing on this, the dates on this. So here's the actual.
I've been reporting on this.
All those whom these presents shall come. Greeting, be it known. this day, I, Joseph R. Biden Jr., President of the United States, pursuant to my powers under the Constitution, granted hereunto Robert Hunter Biden a full and unconditional pardon. Unconditional. But what are the dates? Look at the date there specifically. During the period from January 1st to 2014 through December 1st, which is yesterday, 2024. Okay, so that means that it expires
he better not
yesterday.
do anything today forward.
Right, yeah. So today going forward, right?
Which he
Can be
is
prosecuted for anything he does today.
Stick to your feces.
He better keep
Art.
his nose clean.
His nose clean and his hookers out of his room and all of that stuff.
Get it? Nose.
But it's the 2014 date that stands out. Okay,
Yes.
why is this so important? Well, this date is so important
But
because it all ties back to Ukraine.
I seen on another report, which I might have it lined up for us to see, that this was also a mistake that Joe Biden rushed to make, because they say once you get a pardon, now if the Republicans call Hunter Biden in to speak before them, he can't plead the fifth. You have to tell the truth. You have to answer the questions. Once you receive the pardon from the president, you can't plead the fifth. So now I wonder how that's going to play out.
And it all ties back to Ukraine and the bioweapons labs there and the dirty money laundering scheme that was set up where money is being funneled to Joe. So again, it's not about Hunter. And of course, it's not about him and his like tax scheme and paying back taxes and not registering a firearm properly. Like that's of
Nobody
course the
really
conviction.
expected him to get a prison sentence anyway. He probably was going to get some type of parole or sweetheart deal. He already had that on the table. So it feels more like, I mean, we covered when his sweetheart deal was presented, which would not have had any jail time, but the judge noticed it came with a blanket pardon and she refused it, forcing the Justice Department to go back to litigate this again. So now that feels purposeful, because had he taken that sweetheart deal, it may not apply to anyone in and around the corruption that had to do with Ukraine.
So More Clandestine posted this, and I'm going to paint a whole picture here, tie all of this together on this show. So Joe pardoned Hunter for all crimes he might be involved in starting on January 1st, 2014. Why did he pick that date? And I'm glad he caught on to this, because this was the thing that stood out to me immediately. Because he says, because 2014 is when the CIA and the State Department took over Ukraine. 2014 is when Hunter Biden's bio company Metabiota began looking for coronaviruses in Ukraine. Joe is not just covering the drug and gun possession charges. Joe is running cover for all of Hunter's criminality in Ukraine, which is really Joe's criminality in Ukraine. Yes, he hits it exactly. This is not just a pardon for Hunter, he says. This is a pardon for Joe. Bingo. You got it right. Now,
because
does
presumably
Metabiota...
his addiction predates 2014. That has nothing to do with it. It has nothing to do with those dates, when really it's drug possession crimes that nailed him for this. So go ahead.
Does Metabiota ring a bell? Well, it should, because if you've been watching our show for any length of time, we've done whole deep dives on Metabiota. I've covered it extensively. Ukraine, the dirty money that, of course, Hunter Biden was involved with. Now, as we recently reported on Redacted, back in 2014, a firm called Metabiota, which specializes in detecting, tracking, and analyzing potential disease outbreaks, signed an $18.4 million contract as a subcontractor for Black and Veatch in Georgia and Ukraine, both of those countries. Metabiota was started with the help from President Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, and his investment from Rosemont Seneca Technology Partners, which he founded alongside John Kerry's stepson in 2009. They really didn't get up and cranking until 2014. So that date is very specific. It is very specific and on purpose. Then, surprisingly, the top Ukrainian prosecutor at the time started looking into this shady connection between Hunter Biden and these biolabs in Ukraine, which, by the way, we were told didn't exist and was a conspiracy theory, right? Until Victoria Nuland was forced to admit under oath in front of the Senate that, in fact, they do exist. But it was, you're a conspiracy theorist. If you talked about biolabs, they labeled us a conspiracy theorist for talking about them. So F you. Yeah, they're true. So when then Vice President Biden caught wind of this, that Ukraine was looking into these shady connections, like Ukraine, which is one of the most corrupt countries in the world, was actually, the prosecutor was looking into these shady connections with Hunter Biden, these biolabs, Metabiota, all of this. Well, that's when Vice President at the time under Obama caught wind of this, and he asked to have that prosecutor fired specifically. We know this because he bragged about it right in front of the cameras. Remember this?
I went over, I guess, the 12th, 13th time.
This is a crime.
And I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I said, I'm not going to, or we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting $1 billion.
How arrogant, how egotistical. You see, the Democrats laugh this off and act like, oh, this was nothing. This was him admitting to a crime, admitting he used our tax dollars to flex on Ukraine, to fire a prosecutor who was investigating his son, the bag man, for him. So he really was trying to fire a prosecutor who was trying to stop his money flow. And he bragging about it on tape. He gonna regret saying that though.
I said, you're not getting $1 billion.
That's evident.
Here, and I think it was 6 hours. I looked, I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a bitch. Got fired.
Wow. How'd that happen?
Which is what Trump was impeached for.
Right.
Which
Come on,
is
man.
exactly what Trump
Come on,
was.
I keep saying this what Trump was impeached for. These people are admitting Trump was impeached for no reason at all, because this all Trump was trying to bring to the light and told Ukraine that they needed to bring this up. And he was impeached for interference. And like he was doing this on behalf of Putin, which was a damn lie. Trump was always telling the damn truth about Ukraine and Joe Biden. And now Biden done pardoned his son, so none of this can be criminally prosecuted.
Impeached for withholding funds in order to ask for a personal political favor, which was asking Zelensky to look into this very thing. So it was corruption and come on.
As
This one has a shit ending, you guys.
Sabrina points out in our chat here, says 11-year blanket immunity. 11-year blanket immunity. That's what this is, unconditionally. And so when they started looking into these documents, when all of this was coming to light, then of course, Ukrainian dictator Zelensky ordered the destruction of all state documents associated with Metabiota, according to the expose. That was February of last year. Leaked documents showed that Zelensky ordered the destruction of all documents related to this Hunter Biden connection. And then wouldn't you know it, overnight, by the way, just today, the Biden administration has ordered another multi-billion-dollar handout to Ukraine. The Biden administration is forcing another, $70 million to Ukraine. Go ahead, Philip.
I'm just having flashbacks to that video we showed outside the records department in Ukraine, where they were just had like burning piles of documents, burning them like right out on the lawn.
Well, what's funny about that video, good memory, is that NBC News was live at the time, and they were saying, the buildings behind us here in Kiev were attacked by Russian forces, and you can see the fires burning. It wasn't an attack from Russia. You could literally see the workers walking out of the building, dumping documents into a fire. It had nothing to do with Russia attacking a building. It had everything to do with them burning documents. So, yeah.
I'm just so curious because Nancy Pelosi and AOC all told us that this was corruption when Trump did it because they thought he was asking for a favor. Well, Biden received the favor and they don't seem to care. They don't care about this obvious corruption. That's, of course, they only care about Ukraine when there's an asking of a favor, right? It's wild when we go back to the actual impeachment trials of President Trump, asking Zelensky to look into this, which clearly was corrupt, and he got impeached for it, but the original corrupt act was never punished.
Right, exactly. Well, this is also why now you have liberals calling for Joe Biden to pardon himself now and give himself unconditional immunity before he leaves office. He's done it for his son. MSNBC, and not just this clip, but multiple Democrats are now saying, you know what, Joe Biden, the Trump administration is probably going to come after you for all this illegality. You might want to give yourself blanket unconditional immunity through your own pardon. Watch.
Grant of clemency. I hope that President Biden will also issue preemptive pardons to all of those people threatened by the injustice of what will become the Department of Justice in the Trump administration. That, of course, includes Jack Smith and all of his staff, many Department of Justice lawyers. It includes President Biden himself, although we don't know that anyone can legally pardon themselves. He will need a pardon because he is going to be harassed and charged for no crimes whatsoever. Donald Trump has promised that.
Right.
Anthony, to pick up on that.
Give yourself unconditional pardoning of yourself.
So we have evidence of corruption inside the Department of Justice and persecuting political opponents. But she's saying that hypothetically, the Justice Department will become unjust. In her mind,
right? It's fine now.
She can see, she's a psychic medium. She can see into the future. She's telling us we need pardons because it is about to become corrupt.
Yeah, it's fine now. Apparently, it's totally fine.
He could also step down, say like resign the presidency, make Kamala president for like a month. She can pardon him, and then that way they don't have to get into the legality.
She's gonna need a pardon too for these war crimes.
Right. Use the end around.
Well, yeah, he
Don't
can
give
do
him ideas.
The end around. He can do the back door. See, the thing is with this, he's not doing this himself, right? Whoever wrote this document up and handed it to him to sign. This isn't Joe Biden sitting down one night thinking he's going to pardon his son.
Nope.
This is a deep state organization that's put this in place in order to protect the lie, the deep corruption, and the money laundering scam through Ukraine. Remember when FTX started collapsing and all of those Democrats started running out of the woodwork like rats on a sinking ship because of that massive multi-billion-dollar money laundering scheme that's been run through Ukraine? It's all being exposed. So, of course, Biden had nothing to do with this. Other people drew up this paper and just like, here, sign this.
Yes, but he personally stood to be protected and he had to have the wherewithal. So even though we say like he doesn't know what he's doing, there's some part of him or the people who protect him who knew what he was doing.
Well, it's funny about it. If you got to go back in history just a little bit, like all of what this had just happened over the past 24 hours was supposed to be stopped because Congress, Adam Schiff, Democrats were so worried about this with President Trump that they introduced legislation to make sure that something like this wouldn't happen. You wouldn't be able to grant a pardon to a family member in the event that there was corruption and and you're president of the United States. Adam Schiff, take it away.
So the president's pardon of Scooter Libby, Congressman, has inspired you to propose new legislation. What exactly would it do?
What it would do is say that in the event the president pardons anyone in an investigation in which the president is a witness, a subject, or the target, those investigative files will all be turned over to the Congress. The Congress ought to know whether the president is using the pardon power to obstruct justice. The American people have a right to know. I think it is clearly constitutional. It doesn't prohibit him from granting a pardon, even a pardon he shouldn't grant. But it does say that we will be able to at least find out whether the president is using this power to shield himself from liability.
It offers transparency at the very least.
Yeah, Don Lemon. It offers transparency at the very least, doesn't it? Whoopi Goldberg today on The View just a few short moments ago says, it has nothing to do. I mean, the reason this is okay is because Hunter Biden is a drug addict, but President Trump, is clear of mind. So that's the distinction here. This pardon is okay for a drug addict. Watch.
I respect it as a parent. I understand why he would do it, but I wonder to understand why lie about it for so long.
I'd stop calling it a lie.
Okay, why repeatedly say you're not going to do? And secondarily, for the part of this country, half of it that doesn't support Biden, doesn't know him personally, doesn't get to have phone calls, and they're just looking at a system that seems like it only benefits the people who are in power.
I'm going to say,
what precedent does that set?
Well, here's what it says. It's a precedent for all of us to open our eyes because we've elected someone who is in a similar situation, who didn't have a drug problem, who knew what he was doing, who clearly stood and said, I can do this. And he did it. So I think for many, many reasons, this is very different than any other situation that we have ever dealt with.
That's bullshit.
Okay.
And she knows it. Also, I would like to follow that up so badly. I would like to be at that table and say, okay, what about all of the people who went to prison because of the 1994 crime bill that Joe Biden authored for the exact same charges that your son now will walk away with? Because those people also had addiction. Those people also had sad stories of addiction. Those people also had parents with broken hearts. Does it only matter? Should you only get off if your last name is Biden? Whoopee.
Yeah, of course, because it's
copious numbers of black men.
No protection.
I don't
No one's
want to
above the
race
law.
grift, but really, he put away so many black men for gun possession after drug crimes, after a drug conviction.
Right.
And so this is the same. So, okay, only white guys with wealthy white guys with the last name
Of
Biden
course.
should get off.
Only Hunter Biden. Yeah. And this, and there's been plenty of Democrats. Jared Polis, of course, governor of Colorado, who's likely going to run for president. Mark my words. He came out against this.
Yeah.
And the reason I think he came out against this is because he's going to be running for president in the next go around. He said this is very disappointing for I get the family connection. He said, I'm sympathetic to the family connection, but this sets a dangerous precedent. I'm deeply disappointed for future presidents of the United States.
Yeah.
Himself running for president. Anyway, Karine Jean-Pierre, there was no White House press briefing today in the traditional sense because they're on an airplane. So they're on Air Force One flying to Angola. And I was waiting for Karine Jean-Pierre to have to answer these questions and battle against this. And so reporters on the aircraft recording it audio only. Listen to Karine Jean-Pierre have to defend this pardoning. Watch.
He's saying his own Justice Department is broken, Karine.
He believes in the Justice Department. He believes that there was
saying all that. He believes in the Justice Department.
This is his words. He said this. This is the president saying
He
this.
just said it's infected with politics.
I said I would not interfere with the Justice Department's decision making. I kept my word, even as I have watched my son being selectively and unfair prosecuted.
So how deep is the rot? How many selective prosecutions are there at the DOJ?
What I can speak to is this particular case, which is Hunter Biden, who has the last name of the president.
So the selective prosecution, I love the question, right? Which is, so the Department of Justice, we stand by the Department of Justice, but then in this particular situation, there's selective prosecution. So he asked, how deep is the rot in the Department of Justice? Oh, well, well, there's no rot. It's perfect. Go ahead, Phil.
Well, and like, in what way is staying out of it? Where does pardoning the person that's being accused fall into the staying out of it? Because it seems to me that's getting awfully involved.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right,
I feel personally robbed that there was not video of that.
I know.
We were looking for that. It was like watching The View on the day after the election.
There's only audio of you on a plane.
That's not right. I don't like that. Somebody, please, in the press pool, when we get more video of her, you need to ask that question again because I need to watch her body language.
By the way, Karine Jean-Pierre knew this was probably coming on a Sunday. She's like enjoying her Sunday afternoon.
Yeah. And then she was like, I'm calling in sick.
And
tomorrow.
then she's like, oh my God, this is what my Monday is going to look like. I have to answer this garbage now.
Yeah.
Anyway.
All right. Well, the New York Post reports that there are nearly 58,000 illegal migrants who are convicted or facing criminal charges roaming New York City free and clear, and close to 670,000 across the country. So the Post did their own investigation. Here's the headline if you want to seek it out for yourself. This comports with the numbers that were confirmed by the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. Recall this document we looked at back in September. It showed that the agency knows about 662,000 non-citizens with criminal histories, but has detained only 15,000. We went over this in detail because this letter lists them by crime. They have, it's a buffet, really. Rapists, arsonists, burglars, gang members, car thieves, armed robbery, all kinds of stuff. It's all kinds of them. But when you actually look at 15,000 in relationship to 662,000 that they know about, it's not like they're really actively catching them. They have sort of accidentally caught them, because we've seen in other documents that ICE is not really trying to catch migrants or criminals at all. These are 662,000 that accidentally fell into their laps. They only have 15,000 in custody. That's a 2% detainment record. If you commit a crime as an illegal migrant, you have a 98% chance of not being detained. Here was how they broke down those numbers, and we broke them down in detail. So seek that episode out in September. So according to the Post, that means that 8% of all of these criminals are in New York City alone. That is quite a lot of criminals in a 302 square mile area. Now, no wonder residents there have complained. Councilman Robert Holden, he's a moderate Democrat from Queens. He said, these numbers make it clear what everyone but our elected officials already know. Sanctuary city laws are endangering New Yorkers by shielding criminals instead of protecting law-abiding citizens. And as for everyone who says, well, most migrants are not criminals, that's true. That number bears out. That means 7.7% of them are criminals and over 90% of them are not. That's still a really high rate. And the way that ICE is supposed to work is you apply to become a citizen, you present a clean background check, you continue to check in and make sure that your background check is clean. And if you commit crimes, you are supposed to be deported. That's how the system is supposed to work. So almost 8% of migrants being rapists and thieves and criminals and gangs, right? That's not okay. That means our system's not working. So New York politicians are sort of responding with tough talk, like Kathy Hochul's like, well, if I know about criminals, I'm going to deport them. But you do. They're there. They're on the books, right. And she hasn't. And New Yorkers are still paying taxes to support migrants. Over the weekend, this was reported that the city had committed $220 million to rent the Roosevelt Hotel, which is a Manhattan landmark owned by the government of Pakistan. The hotel houses over 1,200 rooms and is being used to accommodate undocumented migrants for 3 years under a lease. So the deal will take U.S. tax dollars and transfer it to the government of Pakistan to house illegal migrants at a rate of $220 million. So here is Tom Homan discussing this on Fox News.
The Democratic mayor in New York, Eric Adams, a former cop, is ready to work with you.
I hope so, because I just been notified he wants to sit down and meet with me. I'm willing to meet with him. I'm willing to meet with anybody to help make their community safer. Because again, prioritization out of the gate is public safety threats. Work with us on that. It makes your community safer. It keeps my officers safe. It keeps the community safe. Let's work together and get this done.
When's that meeting happen?
I haven't responded yet, but I'll respond this week.
Okay, we'll be in touch with you and him.
Wow. Eric Adams. Eric Adams, he seems like changed a leaf lately.
He has been saying this, though. He has been motivated to do this since midsummer at least. So he might be the only one, but he needs law enforcement to do it. He clearly cannot do it by himself. He needs support and law enforcement. So we'll see if that happens. But in the meantime, New York City residents have to just chill out, knowing that there's 60,000 criminals on their street that are illegal, that shouldn't be there. They can't deal with, local criminals. They've got a brand new problem. And I'm sorry, let me just finish this point. As the police commissioner, who has been dethroned since, said, these are very sophisticated migrant gangs. He called them ghost criminals, that the city has a hard time even tracking them.
Well, 58,000 illegal immigrants in New York City, criminals that are rapists and murderers, et cetera. That's one thing. There's 607. There's always this like New York centricity about the country, like I know it's like focus on New York City, and that's very important. But in your other number there, that's 670,000 illegals across the United States, almost a total of 700,000. So there's 58,000 in New York City, right? 670,000 across the United States. Yeah. Rapists, murderers, known felons that the Biden administration has just wide open their doors to. Yeah. So here's a question for you. Why would the worst, and this ties directly to this story because this is a big piece of it, why would the worst DHS secretary in American history need immunity if he agrees to resign? Like, will Alejandro Mayorkas resign and then seek immunity before he does so? Well, the deep state scumbag is running scared right now across Washington, D.C. because they know what's coming. Criminal charges against DHS head Mayorkas. Yes, breaking. DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas is reportedly negotiating his exit to leave immune from any potential investigations from the Trump administration.
To which I say, absolutely not. Absolutely not. He testified just a few weeks ago on Congress about reports of these undocumented children. They call them unaccompanied minors. Over 300,000 of them have been lost. And when a congressman asked him, do you recall these instances of young minors, unaccompanied minors, being dropped off at strip clubs as their addresses, listing men who were not their relatives being dropped off in homes of young men who were not relatives of them, where these young girls had no private bathroom or bedroom. And he said, I read the report, but I don't recall. So those instances, dropping unaccompanied minors off at strip clubs, he read about that and he forgot it. That's not a memorable story that you, in a report about your own government's handling of immigrants.
And not even your own government, your own department's
Your own
handling.
departments, thank you.
He's running a criminal organization that is facilitated by Mayorkas. He, at the very top of this, has been facilitating and carrying this out, flying into the Darien Gap in Panama, as friend of the show Michael Yan was there on the ground and watched him land. He knows exactly what's happening and funneling these illegal immigrants into the United States, and he knows exactly what's happening to these children, because it's all tied together with these non-governmental organizations, these NGOs. And now we're getting word from the Trump administration that in fact they are going to be targeting and going after these NGOs specifically. They know that by going after these NGOs, where it will lead, criminal charges all the way to the top, all the way up to Alejandro Mayorkas and other members of, Javier Becerra, and those individuals who are handing out billions of dollars to these non-governmental organizations. So he wants blanket immunity. He wants immunity before he leaves office so that he can be protected. The problem is that immunity wouldn't cover you, like for your own job. You get immunity from the government. You already get immunity shielded because you're doing your job. But the problem is, if you're not doing your job, then it rises to the level of illegality and criminality, and immunity wouldn't protect you. You already get immunity as a government employee in the cabinet. You can't be sued already. He can't be charged. He can be protected in that way. But the moment that criminality and illegality enter into this, immunity is out the window under your protection. So I'm wondering what he's looking for here. Like, is he asking the president to do another, like a preemptive pardon in the same way that Hunter Biden? And this is exactly, by the way, what Keith Olbermann is calling for, and other liberals right now are calling for this. Like, hey, President Biden, you should just issue hundreds of pardons right now. And even Keith Olbermann said, issue 10 million pardons for everyone that works in the executive branch. Issue 10 million of them. What that says is, so there's 10 million corrupt people carrying out criminality.
I have an idea.
In the Biden administration. What's your idea?
My idea is take blanket pardons preemptively and move to Canada. Do that. Like, you can get the pardon, but you have to leave, so you can never do this to us again. Sorry, Canadians. I know we have a lot of Canadian viewers who probably don't like that.
Friend of the show, David Creighton, up there in Ottawa. Like, no, don't send them here.
Send them. I don't mean Canada. Send them to, I don't know. Like, let's just
send them to Ukraine.
Send them to Epstein Island.
Send them to Epstein Island. Yes. Ukraine loves corruption.
If you take a pardon, you have to get the F out. Fine. Then I mean, I don't want to see this happen. I want
Zelensky could make it. Yeah,
sure.
Yeah,
but they have to leave.
Solutions, KEG super chat here. Solutions demand tangible, fundamental procedural changes, not more 4D chess that equate to your loss. Stop asking for saviors and gossiping. Solve it together.
Siberia is another great.
I think Ukraine. So anyway, the reason this is all happening, the reason this is all happening is because we now know from Tom Homan, who is the new border czar, that in fact the Biden administration is going to go after these.
All right, our top story. President Biden yesterday pardoned his son Hunter
after promising the American people that he would let his son face the music for what he did.
Will you accept the jury's outcome, their verdict, no matter what it is?
Yes.
And have you ruled out a pardon for your son?
Yes. I stand abide by the jury decision. I will do that. I will not pardon.
Okay, joining us to discuss is the co-host of The Five, Judge Janine Pirro. She's already giggling. What do you make of the fact that Joe Biden gave him a get-out-of-jail-free card for 10 years? Anything you did that we know about or didn't know about,
right?
They can't hold you responsible.
Well, look, Joe Biden has lied to us from the get-go. As soon as he came into office, he said, I know nothing about my son's business dealings. Right. Then we know he's flying him to China, and then all the photographs with his partners and all that. So Joe Biden is leaving lying. Here's the bottom line. Joe Biden is complaining that his son was targeted, that it was selective prosecution. Mr. President, with all due respect, you're wrong. People go to jail for this stuff all the time, and it was your Justice Department that allowed the statute of limitations to run on the highest earning years that involved you. But let me say this. If he really believed that the Department of Justice selectively prosecuted him, why didn't he fire Merrick Garland? I mean, why didn't he say, you know what, Merrick, this is it. You did something wrong. Everybody knows what happened here was a cover-up from the get-go of the crimes. They had to get David Weiss in there. They had a corrupt plea deal that a judge uncovered, and he was going to jail. We're talking about a two-time felony convict. So, now they can turn around and say the system's bad. But in the end, at least Donald Trump, his cases, two of them were dismissed. And the third one in Georgia is a blow up, and the one in Manhattan's a piece of crap that on appeal will go away.
Well, I think Joe Biden, and there are a bunch of Democrats and people who voted for Kamala Harris, and obviously they were in Joe Biden's camp, he has angered them. But then again, they squeezed Joe Biden out. I don't think he cares.
Well, I don't
a
think
little
he
revenge
cares either. But you know what? He always was going to pardon him. And I'm very upset. Karine Jean-Pierre is not having a press conference for a couple of days. I wanted to hear her say, the president has always made it clear he loves Hunter.
You know where we stand.
The president's son had a problem, baloney. Let's talk about Penny.
Let's do talk. Daniel Penny today, the closing argument.
Yeah.
Will you accept the jury's outcome, their verdict, no matter what it is?
Yes.
And have you ruled out a pardon for your son?
Yes. I stand abide by the jury decision. I will do that. I will not pardon.
Not true. Fox News alert this morning, fallout over President Biden's big reversal as he pardons his son Hunter after repeatedly claiming he would never pardon his son Hunter. Fox News legal editor Carrie Urban joins us now. Carrie, your reaction to something we all knew was coming and the letter that followed to explain.
Yeah, we knew this was coming. We knew that he wasn't telling the truth. We knew he was going to do it one way or the other. But I have to say, Brian, my takeaway from all of this is that this is actually fantastic, politically speaking, for Donald Trump. Joe Biden has lowered the bar so much here in offering this pardon to Hunter Biden that I think Donald Trump will be able to pardon a whole host of people, including January 6th, without necessarily the pushback he would have received otherwise. Of course, the people in the media will complain because they always do. But what can they point to at this point? So you have that. Maybe he could even explore preemptive pardon for himself. And then, of course, he doesn't just now have a mandate from the American people in cleaning up the justice system who are sick of lawfare. Now he has it from President Biden, too. They're all on the same page. So they all agree that there's a problem in the justice system. The pardons are going to become a lot easier. And also, Joe Biden just pulled the ultimate move in overriding the DOJ, which, of course, in the past, people would go crazy if Donald Trump had anything to say about what the Department of Justice was doing. So I personally think President Biden just made things a whole lot easier for Donald Trump going to term 2.
I think that's a good point, too. And it's the first time I can remember Democrats coming out blatantly against him. You know, Governor Jared Polis says, you know, I understand it's his son, but he thought he can't support it, this action. It's a bad precedent. Should be abused by later presidents, case in point. And Congressman Greg Stanton, a Democrat from Arizona. I respect Biden, but I think he got this wrong. This wasn't a politically motivated prosecution. Hunter committed felonies and was convicted by a jury of his peers. But I find stunning, and must really bother you as somebody who lives in the law world, is that he says, I trust the justice system, the justice system, but not now, not here, but I still trust it. Also, he lied on something so honest. Right. I thought over the weekend I decided to make the decision. Why wait? We know you didn't decide over the weekend. So why would someone, if you were his attorney, why put all these things that are so easily exploited in a letter to explain something so controversial?
Because I don't think he cares. He's trying to have it both ways on his way out. What does he have to lose at this point? Nothing. You know, there'll be a 24-hour, 48-hour news cycle on this, if that, maybe a line in his Wikipedia page. But what kind of ramifications does Joe Biden face for this? Nothing. He really doesn't. And so I think that, again, politically, it's good for Donald Trump. It's not bad for Joe Biden. And I will say this, Brian, I thought it was interesting in his statement about them treating Hunter differently. I actually agree with him a little bit on that, because they did give him special treatment up front. And the only reason we know that they did is because of those whistleblowers. And then when the political pressure was so intense as to what they had done, and then we saw it all fall apart in court, that's when they changed. So they made a deal with Hunter they never should have made in the first place. So that was bad. That's special treatment. But then they pulled the deal, which, by the way, is also not fair once you've done something like that. So they messed up this entire case. He's not wrong in that he was treated differently. I just have a little bit of a different perspective on how differently he was treated.
Right. This is just real quick on the plea deal. He said they had a carefully negotiated plea deal agreed to by the department and unraveled in the courtroom. It unraveled in the courtroom because the judge said, I've never seen anything quite like this. Can you explain it? And both sides go, no. So let's start again.
Right. But I think that's a point of truth in this statement. I think that Hunter Biden and his lawyers were genuinely surprised. I think that DOJ had worked out this plea deal of a lifetime, was hoping it would go away, was giving him the special treatment, and then they got caught, they were exposed, and then they leaned in really heavily. So that's what happened there.
Carrie, I know there's so much more we could talk about, but I appreciate putting their perspective. And the one person smiling lives at Mar-a-Lago.
Using or addicted to drugs. And he said no. But then his laptop happened, which was really a treasure trove of na 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 boo boo, I'm rich, and there's really nothing that you can do about it. For example, one of the videos, of the many videos in his laptop that he had filming himself smoking crack, there was one video in which he was smoking crack while driving 172 miles per hour in Vegas. I'm just showing you a still here of that video. Look, he's smiling. He's just so happy because he's on crack, right? So he's like, look at me, ha ha, no rules of Hunter Biden. And here's another still of another video of him smoking crack. And here's another still of another video of Hunter Biden smoking crack. So Hunter Biden is a unique case of crack confidence. I mean, I feel weird. I'm not kidding. If I'm holding a glass of wine in a photo, I'm like, oh, like, I feel this might be a little bit trashy.
You knew he would get a
This
pardon?
guy, no, he's just doing whatever. He loved it so much and was really proud of himself and felt that even just by himself, he needed to record himself breaking the law. And that's not it, by the way. If you're thinking, okay, it was just a gun charge, nope. Hunter Biden also pled guilty. So the question of whether or not he is guilty. He pled guilty to 9 federal tax charges, 3 felonies and 6 misdemeanors in Los Angeles in September for falsifying records and failing to file tax returns dating to a period when he was you guessed it, hooked on crack cocaine, alcohol, and he had so much access to cash. He owed at least $1.4 million during the period of 2016 to 2019. I want you to remember those dates, 2016, 2019. He's falsifying records, not paying taxes, and making a ton of money and spending it on a lot of crack. Okay, now, if regular people don't file their taxes for 3 years, if regular people are caught falsifying records and lying to the IRS to the tune of millions of dollars, we will be hunted down. And when those federal agents find you, you can't just be like, sorry, I was smoking crack. That's just not a legitimate excuse. I mean, at least in our world, it's not a legitimate excuse. But apparently for the rich and the famous and the political, this treatment of Hunter Biden is somehow unfair because it is a legitimate excuse. We should be more understanding that actually, even though he pled guilty and even though he recorded himself committing various crimes, the only reason he was prosecuted was because he was Joe Biden's son. Or at least that's what Joe Biden is saying. He released a statement to that effect when he pardoned his son. I'm just going to read you the beginning of this statement because it's all you need to get the gist. Here is what Joe Biden wrote. And by Joe Biden wrote, I mean, here is what somebody else wrote because Joe Biden has been incapacitated for 6 months. He wrote, quote, somebody else wrote, quote, today I signed a pardon for my son, Hunter. From the day I took office, I said I would not interfere with Justice Department's decision-making, and I kept my word, even as I have watched my son being selectively and unfairly prosecuted without aggravating factors like use in a crime, multiple purchases, or buying a weapon as a straw purchaser. People are almost never brought to trial on felony charges solely for how they filled out a gun form. Those who were late paying their taxes because of serious addictions, but paid them back subsequently with interest and penalties are typically given non-criminal resolutions. It is clear that Hunter was treated differently. Yes, Mr. President, it certainly is very clear that your son has been treated differently his entire life. On that, we definitely agree. And by the way, what is he speaking about? Was I not alive last year, the year before, the last 5 years, watching all of these reality stars being prosecuted for the exact same crimes? Let's not forget, reality stars Todd and Julie Chrisley of the show Chrisley Knows Best are currently serving time in prison for tax evasion and fraud and falsifying documents. That's happening currently. Also, who could forget Joe and Teresa Giudice? They're now divorced. They were married. They were on The Real Housewives of New Jersey. They both spent time in prison for the exact same crime, falsifying documents, tax evasion, fraud. And by the way, I was sympathetic to Teresa Giudice. Like, I actually believed her when she said, I don't know what I'm signing. He just does it all. Like, I believe that. And they still sent her ass to prison. But for Hunter Biden, no, guys, he's being treated differently. Because he was smoking crack. That's what the president is saying. My son had an addiction issue. He was smoking crack. Maybe that's what they should have said. The Giudices, the Chrisleys, maybe they should have been like, listen, I was doing these things while smoking crack. That's my new excuse I'm dropping forever. Like, I'm just going to be like, yeah, no, sorry. I was smoking crack. You need to be forgiving about all the things that I'm not doing and supposed to do. Hear me out, IRS. I was smoking crack. So people are understandably outraged about this decision because also before he issued this extraordinary pardon, we were reliably informed by the mainstream media that the adults were back in charge. Oh, the Democrats, they're back in charge. No, this criminal's out of office. This Trump guy's out of here. The Bidens, oh, they're so wonderful, so moral, so highbrow. They would never pardon their son if he had done something wrong. Take a listen to this media montage of them reminding us.
Presidential promise to put the law before family.
I said I abide by the jury decision. I will do that, and I will not pardon him.
Letting the world know that he will not wipe away the decision of 12 of his son's peers.
Was asked directly, and he has said he wouldn't pardon his son if he gets convicted.
Let's wait and see what happens if he loses.
Yeah, but I mean, he said it.
He's going to get pardoned by his dad. There's no question about that.
The president has ruled out pardoning his son.
It takes new weight when we see what Trump is saying about the outcome of his trial. What we're hearing from other Republicans who say they don't accept the jury's verdict here in New York.
The contrast is profound. To sit there and say, well, I'm not going to intervene in the legal process and I wouldn't pardon my son. One side, Democrats and Joe Biden protecting the justice system. And on the other, Republicans and Trump protecting Trump.
Our current president of the United States has so much respect for the law that he has said he would not pardon his son. I mean, what, again, it's all about the contrast.
President Biden saying, I will respect whatever this jury decides,
That's
versus
right.
Donald Trump after he was convicted on 34 counts, saying the entire system is rigged against him.
Oopsies. He lied. He pardoned him. And big time, by the way, because there's something here that most people are missing, and I want to make it perfectly clear. It is not the tax and gun charges that Hunter Biden is being pardoned for. That's just a smokescreen. That's just something to run to the press with, because Joe Biden, pay close attention here, rather curiously pardoned Hunter for all of the offenses that he, quote, has committed or may have committed or taken part in between January 1st, 2014 and December 1st, 2024. Whoa, 2014? 2014? Wait a minute. Now, if that tax crime took place in 2016 and that gun crime took place in 2018, why is Daddy Biden pardoning Hunter dating back years earlier, specifically January 1st, 2014? What happened then? What were we doing then? Oh, I know. We were overthrowing a duly elected president in Ukraine. That's what I know. Ukraine. Back in 2014, Joe Biden was vice president. It was Obama's White House, and we staged a coup in Ukraine. We just overthrew a president, turned Ukraine into a laundromat for the West. We were just money laundering. They're making money. We funded, like, this is always our move. We fund rebels to overthrow presidents. We're doing it right now in Syria. We arm them, we fund them. And this time in 2014, in February 2014, to be specific, we overthrew President Viktor Yanukovych, and we installed a Western puppet president. And that is, by the way, part of the reason and the circumstance that has led to the situation in Russia today. Yes, on Putin's border, we staged a coup. Might be a little bit upsetting to him. I'm going to jog your memory about that before I explain to you the Hunter connection. Here is my buddy Dave Smith discussing what happened in Ukraine in 2014 with Joe Rogan.
Listen to your enemies. There's a reason why he hates us. And if you listen to Vladimir Putin and what he's saying, I mean, look, he's wrong for invading Ukraine. And I mean, you know me, Joe, I'm the most anti-war fucking person there is. And there's no excuse for that. And like tens of thousands of people have died. It's horrible. And a lot of them are soldiers, but a lot of them are civilians. And but to say he was unprovoked is like insane. It's just only people who know nothing about the history of this conflict would say there was no provocation.
Did you see the conversation that Roger Waters had with that CNN guy?
Yeah, and right, because Roger Waters was awesome on that, because he knows what he's talking about, dude. And he's right about all of that shit. Look, the promise, and this is what he was saying, and he's absolutely right, is that the promise when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, and this was like verbally promised and put in writing, was that NATO would not expand 1 inch to the east. And NATO at that point, the line then was through Germany, right? Like the western half of Germany was in the west, and the eastern half was with the Soviet Union. And they were like, we'll let all of these nations, secede, and the Soviet Union will collapse, and we're giving up on communism. It's one of the greatest things that ever happened. And the deal was, okay, you do that, then we won't move NATO. We won't move our military alliance into your area that used to be your realm of influence. And every single president since then has moved NATO east to the point that NATO is now on Russia's border. And in Ukraine, even though they didn't officially join NATO, there was always talk of it. Kamala Harris, right before the start of the war, said we're looking to put Ukraine into NATO. And they put under George W. Bush, they put in Poland these dual-use rocket launchers. There's a big complaint that Vladimir Putin has, that he's like, these can be used to get nukes here in a matter of minutes. Like this is like a threat to us that we cannot tolerate. And then in 2014, there was a coup in Ukraine that was completely led by the West. I don't know if you've ever heard, but like I think I sent you actually once the tape of Gideon Rose, who was the editor for Foreign Affairs magazine on the old Stephen Colbert Report show back when Colbert was hilarious. And he was just openly bragging about what the game is here. And then he was like, well, Ukraine is kind of like the Robin to Russia's Batman. And so our job is to steal Robin away from Batman and make him come over here and join us. And Vladimir Putin's so stupid that he won't do anything. And then Colbert's in his old character. So he's like, well, shouldn't Obama be spiking the football and saying, yeah, in your face, Putin? And Gideon Rose is like, well, no, because then Putin might invade Ukraine. So we wouldn't want to spike the ball.
Oh, but we did sort of spike that ball, didn't we? We totally, like I said, installed the puppet president. And right after we did that, a Ukrainian energy company, Burisma, decided to put Hunter Biden, the vice president's son, then vice president's son, on its board in 2014. Hunter, a lawyer with no experience in the energy sector, suddenly put on the board of an energy company based in Ukraine. And suddenly they start doing some pretty big energy deals in that region with Kazakhstan, with an energy company that's based in Delaware, you name it. Hunter Biden starts making bank. And he did all of this while he was a crackhead and giving financial kickbacks to his father. That was the big guy. We learned that from his emails, also from the laptop, that he wanted 10% for the big guy. So what's the lesson in all of this, guys? Why am I actually happy about this? Because finally, we can stop listening to the Democrats pretend that they have the moral high ground. They're just implausibly corrupt. In fact, they're ghetto. The Biden family, let's be very clear, they are ghetto. I mean, think about it. The Bidens are so powerful that the entire media tried to convince Americans. They really did this. You got to go back and read the articles. But it was beautiful and wonderful that after Hunter Biden's brother, Beau Biden, died of cancer, Hunter started sleeping with his wife, Hallie. Oh my gosh, this is actually beautiful. And they've mourned together and they miss him so much. Please, guys, if I die of cancer and my sisters decide they're going to date my husband, hunt them down. These are terrible human beings. We all understand this, but the media code is just to defend the Biden family no matter what, because they are like corrupt royalty. That's really what's gone on. And then what happened, obviously, is they did not stay together. In fact, Hallie Biden ended up testifying that Hunter got her addicted to crack. So she became a crackhead as well temporarily, and they both had to go to rehab together, but the media didn't care. They were trying to sell it to us like this was just a beautiful Cinderella story. This family is also so powerful that after years of Hunter Biden recording himself smoking crack, he dropped off his laptop to be repaired, then never picked it back up because who cares? I'm rich, not a boo-boo. And when we got to learn what was in that laptop, the entire mainstream media and big tech and the intelligence agencies, do not forget, you had all of these former intelligence members, John Brennan being one of them, signed a letter to convince the American public that it was Russian disinformation. Like, I was looking at a trove of photos of Hunter Biden smoking crack, and then I had the intelligence agencies literally being like, do not believe your own eyes. It's your imagination. This is Russian disinformation. I'm like, no, it's a video of Hunter Biden smoking crack. We're like, no. And they started banning our accounts and censoring our accounts as we were sharing information going, hey, this family might be criminal. I think they're involved in some shady dealings in Ukraine. And then as soon as Biden gets into office, the first thing he does is gets involved in Ukraine, pulls us out of Afghanistan, goes straight to Ukraine. The media's like, no. The laptop is not real. And then they had to admit it was real. But now it's been so long, people have forgotten about all of the weird things that were in that laptop. I mean, this family is so powerful that they are still keeping the media quiet about the most demented aspects of what was found on that laptop. I know what my account got frozen for on Twitter at the time. It was the text messages between Jim Biden, that's Hunter Biden's uncle, and Hunter Biden regarding an allegation that Hallie made that after getting her addicted to crack, Hunter Biden was sexually inappropriate with her daughter, meaning Beau's daughter, meaning his niece. That's what the text messages were talking about. And by the way, she would have been underage at that time. Media doesn't talk about it. So yeah, don't worry, guys. Don't worry. He's being treated unfairly, and that's why he's being pardoned. And the women at The View are here to remind us to ignore all of the noise and stay focused, because it's really about Trump and how corrupt Trump is. And again, Hunter Biden was smoking crack. Take a listen.
I respect it as a parent. I understand why he would do it, but I wanted to understand why about it for so long.
I would stop calling it a lie.
Okay, why repeatedly say you're not going to and you do? And secondarily, for the part of this country, half of it that doesn't support Biden, doesn't know him personally, doesn't get to have phone calls, and they're just looking at a system that seems like it only benefits the people who are in power.
I'm going to say,
what precedent does that set?
Well, here's what it says. It's a precedent for all of us to open our eyes because we've elected someone who is in a similar situation, who didn't have a drug problem, who knew what he was doing, who clearly stood and said, I can do this. And he did it. So I think for many, many reasons, this is very different than any other situation that we have ever dealt with.
Yeah, you heard it here first, you guys. Remember, the real issue is that Trump doesn't smoke crack. And that's what we got to focus on. It's like, do we have to pay attention? He smoked, he was high the whole time. But Trump, he's not high. And that's the message that we want to leave you guys with. If you're gonna do the thing, if you break the law, it's only okay if you are smoking tons of crack and your daddy becomes president of the United States. All right, guys, reminding you about Hallow. It's a wonderful app. It's the best way to help keep God at the center of this season. You can join Hallow's Advent Pray 25 Prayer Challenge. Hallow is the #1 Christian prayer and meditation app in the world, offering thousands of guided prayers to help you get closer to God. And for their prayer challenge, it is called For God So Loved the World, and it's going to help you experience the transformational power of God's love this Advent season. In the prayer challenge, survivalist Bear Grylls and Jonathan Rumi from The Chosen guide you through the book A Severe Mercy, a remarkable story of a couple's encounter with God. You'll also hear from Pastor Francis Chan and Jeff Cavins as they take you through reflections on scripture, and actor Kevin James will also be a part of the challenge to discuss the spiritual classic Divine Intimacy. You'll even hear Advent music from award-winning artists Gwen Stefani, Lauren Daigle, Matt Maher, and more. This season will be such a beautiful opportunity to be seriously transformed by God. So do not wait. You can get 3 months free right now when you sign up at hallow.com/Candace. Spend time in the most important things this Christmas, your relationship with God. That's hallow.com/Candace for 3 months free of Hallow. All right, we got to get into this wicked story, this wicked press tour. I don't even know where to begin. All right, I'll just begin with myself as a parent. Discussions that me and my husband have. I'm one of those parents that has a list of extracurricular activities that my children are just completely banned from. I know.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I'm still laughing from watching this compilation. This is going to be probably the greatest thing you see today. The leftoid media owning themselves as if they didn't see this coming, that Joe Biden would pardon his son. The guy's been a crook since the beginning. I'm going to let the video speak for itself. This is great stuff. Absolute gold. Let's get it.
A current president of the United States has so much respect for the law that he has said he would not pardon his son. I mean, again, it's all about the contrast.
President Biden saying, I will respect whatever this jury decides, versus Donald Trump after he was convicted on 34 counts, saying the entire system is rigged against him.
Their latest attack has been that Joe Biden has politicized and weaponized the DOJ, right? That was the whole argument around Donald Trump's conviction. And this week, of course, Hunter Biden was found guilty, and Joe Biden has very clearly said he would not pardon his son, he would not commute his sentence. How stark is this difference? I mean, how can Republicans keep making this argument now that Joe Biden has really put it out there? Where's Hunter? And he stood there in a courtroom, flanked by his family, and he's accepted his sentence.
Presidential promise to put the law before a family.
I said I abide by the jury decision. I will do that, and I will not pardon him.
Letting the world know that he will not wipe away the decision of 12 of his son's peers.
Was asked directly, and he has said he wouldn't pardon his son if he gets convicted.
Let's wait and see what happens if he loses.
Yeah, but he said it.
He's going to get pardoned by his dad. There's no question about that.
The president has ruled out pardoning his son.
Major commitment from the president, accepting the outcome of the trial and also pledging
not to pardon his son.
So the challenge for him is really to continue to live up to his values when it was really personal, and he did that today.
It seems like a pretty normal, straightforward answer, but it takes new weight when we see what Trump is saying about the outcome of his trial, what we're hearing from other Republicans who say they don't accept the jury's verdict here in New York.
The contrast is profound. To sit there and say, well, I'm not going to intervene in the legal process and I wouldn't pardon my son. One side, Democrats and Joe Biden protecting the justice system. And on the other, Republicans and Trump protecting Trump.
He is not pardoning his son, which he could do. These are federal charges.
Right.
He is not doing that. He is not doing it because he is living what it means to have a rule of law in this country.
Yeah.
And it is, I mean, if you want to know if he believes it, you could actually see what is happening with his own son.
The president, Anderson, has been really clear that he is going to accept the outcome of the trial no matter what happens.
So Joe Biden's gotten asked about, talking about law and order. He's gotten asked if he would pardon his son. He has said no. On the other side, you've got Donald Trump, who has said that he will pardon the January 6th insurrectionists. Yeah. They're not even his sons. They're just sons of bitches.
Washington said, I am not running again because he understood the self-restraint was absolutely essential to this country. So you don't have a king. He did not pardon his son. He did not order the Department of Justice to say, don't prosecute my son. So impressive.
Could have ordered the Justice Department to halt the prosecution of Hunter Biden, according to this court. Everyone understands he's a decent man.
I think Joe Biden has a chance here to stand up for the rule of law, to say the law is the law, no matter who it is, no matter if it's Trump or Biden. And remember, part of Trumpism's dangerousness is that it tears down institutions, important institutions of our democracy. So there's an opportunity here for Biden to say, the jury found him guilty. This is how it's supposed to work. Period, paragraph, end of story.
Have you ruled out a pardon for your son?
Yes.
As I said last week, I will accept the outcome of this case and will continue to respect the judicial process as Hunter considers an appeal. The president said he won't touch it. He said he's not going to pardon his son. And it seems that Merrick Garland let it go through. How can the Justice Department be weaponized against Trump when all of that is happening?
But Democrats stand for the rule of law. Remember, law and order. And we've been saying that Trump's not above the law. Hunter Biden's not above the law. No one is above the law. And it is amazing to see the stark contrast between how Democrats handled today and how Republicans handled this whole thing over the last couple of weeks.
For years, these conservatives have been crowing about a politicized Justice Department, Biden politicizing it, and so on. What happened today? The Justice Department convicted the president's own son, his only living son. You heard the president say he would accept the outcome of the case. I know no other word for that, but presidential.
Mm-hmm. He even went so far as to say he wouldn't pardon his son. That's how much respect he has for the system.
The president has said that he will not pardon his son. What did you think of that?
I thought it was extraordinary. I mean, it was a moment of just moral clarity on the part of Joe Biden, and couldn't have been in starker contrast to the way Donald Trump has handled his own conviction.
Guys, sorry to stop it here. I know this thing's awesome, but if you don't mind smashing that thumbs up for your boy, and if this is not your first time here and you're not yet subscribed, hopefully this will be the video in which I can earn your subscription. Let's get back to these bozos.
Joe Biden has already proven he's willing to stand up for the rule of law in a way that we could all never imagine Donald Trump to do.
Pretty emphatic over the last few days that he does not plan to pardon or commute his son. What that really is him saying is, I don't plan to use the powers of the office, the powers of the presidency, to provide private relief for my family. In a sense, he's staking out a pretty bright line between being, as he says, a president and a dad. And that's not just an emotional expression. He's, in effect, saying, I don't think that I don't have a right, even if it's legal, and God knows it must be tempting, to use this power in a way that is not available to so many other Americans facing similar kinds of struggles. There's a kind of old school sort of flinty core to his conception of how you are to be in the system, how you are to be as a person, a moral person, and ultimately how to contend with questions of power. One of the things that anybody who spends time around Joe Biden comes to know is that he's had this long-running focus on how much he is bothered by abuses of power.
Still pardon him. He said he won't do that. All of that conduct, given that it's his son,
is kind of, we should pause for a moment and think about how unbelievable that is. In a million years, if the shoe were on the other foot and Donald Trump was facing the prospect of his son being prosecuted by a Biden, me, if I had been held over, a Biden holdover or Obama holdover prosecutor, not in a million years would that have happened. So, some of the people on the right, the people who support Donald Trump, are trying to cast this as some clever ops program.
Yeah. Hunter Biden was found guilty by a jury of his peers, just like Donald Trump, because this is our justice system at work. The divide here is stunning, and it's a great reminder that one political party remains committed to the rule of law and the other doesn't.
Will accept the verdict no matter what it is, and that he has ruled out pardoning his own son. Contrast that from what we hear from Donald Trump. And again, we have to underline, in no uncertain terms, President Biden saying, I will accept the outcome. I will accept what the jury decides here. That's the way our legal system works. And no, I will not pardon my own son if he is convicted.
And the contrast is so clear in terms of decency and principle and transactional guidance in terms of how you view the world.
It is still a good day for the United States that this conviction is a prime example of the way our judicial system is supposed to work. Even President Biden saying in a statement that he would respect the outcome of this case. Those words so completely contrast with what his opponent, now a convicted felon himself, continues to say about the U.S. courts.
The contrast to how Trump has behaved, how Trump has treated the rule of law. This was a good day for the system, good day for sort of America as an example of how the rule of law should work.
President Biden told David Muir that he would absolutely accept the verdict, whatever it was, and that he would not pardon his son, regardless. And today he said the same thing in a statement. Meanwhile, Donald Trump comes out and calls the justice system completely unfair. What do you think of that contrast?
There's the contrast of two different men.
Here is Joe Biden, who has lost a son who served honorably in the armed forces, who now has basically said, I will sacrifice my surviving son's future. I will allow him to serve a prison term if that's what's determined, because that is what the rule of law demands.
The president announces that he will not pardon his son. Do you think ordinary Americans give enough thought to how this system...
Guys, Joe Biden has been a criminal since the beginning. His whole family has made it rich off of him being a politician. Not only Hunter Biden, his brothers, his sisters, and the guy pardoned his son, in a way, by proxy, pardoned himself from any wrongdoing, pardoned Hunter Biden from 2014 to 2024, a decade. He pardoned him for a decade, not only of the stuff he was found guilty of, the gun charge and the tax charge, but anything that he might have done that we don't know about, or, quote unquote, don't know about yet. Hunter was the bag man for the Biden crime family. Joe's covering his own ass. This video was awesome. Hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, smash that thumbs up button for your boy. Consider subscribing to the channel, help it grow. Catch you all in the next video.
Groceries is absurd. Or go to LearJudgeNap.com. Scott Ritter, my dear friend, welcome here. Welcome on the show. As always, your time is so much appreciated. Before we get to how near to the end is Ukraine, and why do the Americans and the West not take President Putin seriously? A couple of questions, if I might, about Israel. In your view, why did Prime Minister Netanyahu agree to a ceasefire with Hezbollah?
Well, there's two reasons. One, the Israeli military was demanding it. It appears that the IDF was just exhausted over a year of fighting. Now they're engaged in a battle in southern Lebanon that they weren't winning. The Hezbollah was resisting fiercely. The Israelis were taking casualties. Morale was collapsing amongst even the most elite units, the Golani Brigade, the 7th Armored Brigade. And the Israeli military said, we're facing strategic defeat, hurting ourselves. We need a ceasefire in the most dangerous front, which is the front with Hezbollah. And so they got the United States to step in, and they also were taking advantage of the fact that Hezbollah itself, has suffered losses, serious losses, leadership losses, and also that I condemn Israel's actions in bombing Beirut wholeheartedly, but the fact of the matter is it worked by inflicting losses on the Lebanese population. They put pressure on the Lebanese government, of which Hezbollah is a part, a very important part, to bring an end to this conflict, to bring a ceasefire in play. And Hezbollah, because it's not just a resistance movement, but it's also a political party, and also knowing that it's been weakened by the fact that their very influential and charismatic leader, Hassan Nasrallah, is dead, Hezbollah couldn't afford to stand up to the will of Lebanon, which prior to the recent weeks was steadfastly behind Hezbollah and what Hezbollah was doing. But because of the losses and the fact that Lebanon is suffering economically, it suffers from internal political divisions, Hezbollah couldn't afford to undo decades of political success and position itself to be this major player in Lebanese politics and then ignore the will of the Lebanese people. So they took advantage of the fact that Hezbollah was also open to the idea of a ceasefire. But mainly this is because Israel needed this pause. They were not in a position to go on in this fight in southern Lebanon.
A former Israeli defense minister who worked with Netanyahu over the weekend accused him of war crimes and accused the Israeli military of genocide. Are cracks starting to appear in the publicly united Israeli front?
Yeah, this is important. This is Moshe Yaalon, former chief of staff and defense minister, but he also at one time was the head of Amman, Israeli and military intelligence, and that's when I knew him. I know him personally. Worked with him, briefed him many times. And this is a very serious man. He is not a dove either. He is hawkish on many of the issues that are out there, but he has taken a look at how Israel has responded to these challenges, and Israel has not been up to the task, especially the Israeli military. And when Moshe Yaalon says that Israel is committing war crimes, and he is a hawk, that means Israel has gone way overboard, beyond anything that could remotely be tolerated or excused as, well, this is just war. This means that there are serious breaks, because Moshe Yaalon was somebody who had worked with Benjamin Netanyahu in the past successfully. And so he's not somebody that has an axe to grind per se against Netanyahu. He is just a man of good moral character himself, who calls it as he sees it. And right now, this had to be very difficult for him, because as I said, he is a hawk on many of these issues. He's not sympathetic, for instance, towards Hezbollah, Hamas, or Iran. But he recognizes the tactics employed by the Israeli military, the behavior of the Israeli military is more harmful to Israel than anything Hamas, Hezbollah, or Iran has done or will do. This is how Israel gets destroyed from within.
And do you think others are likely to see the genocide the way former General Alon, former Defense Minister Alon, sees it?
Yes, I think this is a growing, there's growing recognition on the part of it. First of all, the Israelis are compelled to look at what's going on right now. They are isolated internationally like they've never been, and they're not used to this. They're not used to this kind of international isolation. And so that isolation, combined with the effects of this isolation, the economic devastation, lack of tourism, is forcing people to re-examine their beliefs and in where they are and how they got there. And I think more and more Israelis are realizing that this is not a good path for them beyond it. I don't know how many Israeli generals now I've heard of former politicians say that Israel is fatally wounded itself. That fatally means dead, Judge. And when you have Israeli generals saying, no, we're on a path of extinction as a nation, as a people, not because the world wants to kill us, but because we're killing ourselves. We're doing it to ourselves. I think there's a growing recognition amongst many Israelis that, hey, we're on a very dangerous path, and if we don't change what we're doing, that could be very well be the outcome that comes our way. So I think more and more you're seeing Israelis realize that something is dreadfully wrong with the way that Israel interfaces with the world and Israel interfaces with itself today.
Just about an hour ago, President-elect Trump, I'm reading this now, it's from a Florida newspaper, issued a grave and loud warning to militants in the Middle East holding hostages, saying if they're not released by January 20th, 2025, they'll be held to pay. What the hell is he talking about?
Well, I'd like to believe that he's talking about the Israelis holding tens of thousands of Palestinians hostage and torturing them, because the Israelis are militants after all. This is a radical government, Zionist government that's committed genocide against the Gazan people and has imprisoned tens of thousands of Palestinians. I'd like to believe that he's talking about holding them to account, that there will be hell to pay, but he's not. He's talking about the United States willing to go to war because Hamas continues to hold roughly 100 Israelis hostage, prisoner. Look, I don't support hostage taking, and I don't classify, even though many of these people that are held are military people, that they're not prisoners of war, because to be prisoners of war, you have to be treated as a prisoner of war. They're being treated as hostages. They're being held as hostages, as leverage, and I'm against it. And I'd like to see them released. But, nothing happens in a vacuum. One of the things that Hamas has said is we'll release our hostages when you release your hostages. And Israel refuses to do that. But more importantly, what more hell does Trump think he can bring to bear on the Palestinian people? I mean, the Israelis have already dropped almost all the 2,000-pound bombs in our inventory. We're going to drop more? We're going to make that rubble shake a little bit more? Hezbollah has been bombed to hell and back by Israel using American planes and American bombs. We're going to make it shake a little bit more. The Houthi have absorbed the air power that we have to deliver, and they keep resisting. I don't think Trump understands that, one, he was elected on a platform of peace. Right. He's supposed to be the guy that never got us into a big war the first term, and he was going to keep us out of a big war. And yet he's promising to get us involved in one of the most complicated regions on the planet to make, them hell is going to be paid. With what? Peacefully? No, he's talking about going to war in a region where war has never solved any of these issues. This is about the most ignorant statement a man could make. And it's a shame he's making it, because it runs against the grain of everything he claimed to stand for when he ran for office.
What is Israel doing in the middle of the Syrian civil war, Scott?
As I said before, Judge, Israel is desperate right now. They got their butts handed to them by by Hezbollah. They had to call for a ceasefire, and that right now they saw a situation where the perception was that Syria was, fruit right for the picking, that if you did this right, you could knock Syria out of the equation, take Assad out of the equation, thereby break up the linkage between Iran, Syria, and Hezbollah that had Iranian weapons flowing in. Hezbollah was felt to be, tied down because of the desire of the Lebanese people, and Iran was clearly not seeking a broader conflict. And so the feeling was that this action could play. And I think this is an important question, because what it says is everybody's talking about Turkey calling the shots. Israel called the shots. Turkey had an operation that was planned to take place in March. This was the Turkish plan. Israel said, no, we have to act now because by March, there's a new president. He may come in and shake things up. All these pieces aren't going to play. We need to go now. And it was Israel that launched this. Remember, Israel was involved in the pagers going off amongst the Syrian military. They planned it, they executed the timing, they're clearly involved. Israel's been behind Turkish intelligence and almost everything they've done, what they've been doing in Azerbaijan, what they've been doing in Kurdistan, and what they've been doing in northern Syria. Israel is the hidden hand here. And Israel wanted this offensive. They were hoping that the offensive would be very successful. It appears that it is stalled, which is why in a moment when Israel asked for a ceasefire with Lebanon or with Hezbollah because they're exhausted, suddenly this shows how desperate they are. They're talking about opening up a southern front against Syria to draw reinforcements away because they can't afford to have this gambit fail. If this gambit fails, it's going to solidify the Hezbollah, Syria, Iranian axis backed by Russia. And they're never going to break it. So this is a big for Israel.
Can they afford to take on the Russians? Can Turkey afford to do that? What will become of Turkey's application to join BRICS?
Right now, I'd say that application, if it isn't in the trash can, it's been put into the bottom drawer. Russia's not going to entertain any Turkish membership in BRICS yet. Turkey's going to have to, repair a lot of relations. Russia is a very capable nation. They can walk and they can chew gum, but they are tied down right now in Ukraine. It's not a miscalculation that Russia, isn't as free today to respond to escalations in the region as they were, for instance, in 2015, 16, 17, all the way up to 2022. Today, they're involved in a major conflict in Europe, not just against Ukraine, but against NATO, the United States, one that could lead to nuclear war. And so while Russia, is not, I won't say they're distracted, meaning that they're not capable of responding. Clearly, they can respond. They won't have the resources on hand to respond as decisively as maybe they would like. And I think that's one of the calculations that Israel and Turkey took into account when greenlighting this attack, is that Russia, in their belief, wouldn't be able to respond decisively. I think we've seen the Russian Air Force prove otherwise.
Is the West and Ukraine finally fearful of Russia because of Oreshnik, or do they not perceive its lethality?
Tough question, Judge. First of all, let's put it this way: they fear the Russian army. Ukraine knows what's happening on the battlefield right now. They're desperate, and this desperation has led the Biden administration to carry out an act of desperation, which is to literally trigger a nuclear war with Russia by greenlighting the use of ATACMS missiles against Russian soil. This is why Russia fired the Oreshnik. But before that, you had Dmitry Peskov say, look, we have a new nuclear doctrine that we just published, and you've already crossed the red line. If we wanted to nuke you, we could do it right now legally because you've done what our doctrine says you're not allowed to do. So please stop doing it. Oreshnik was fired in order to compel the United States to withdraw its permission. When you look at Vladimir Putin talk about Oreshnik, he can barely hide his Cheshire cat smile. He's so pleased with what this is, and the military is so cocky and all this. But then you take a look at the posturing of Ukraine in the West, and whether this is deliberate or it's reflective of maybe the weapon wasn't as impressive as the Russians claim it would be, but they haven't stopped. They've continued the ATACMS strikes, which has led Russia to say, well, we may have to hit you again with Oreshnik, this time with maybe 2 to 3 missiles. We have them. We're ready to fire them. This is an escalation, a dangerous escalation. And you have to wonder, is the West deceiving itself? Meaning maybe Oreshnik is very effective, but the Biden administration is gambled on, tying this conflict up into so many knots that Trump can't untie it when he comes into office. And key to this is continued, use of ATACMS missiles. It's a very dangerous situation, though, one that I think that the Biden administration is grossly miscalculating on, because whatever Oreshnik did or didn't do, the fact is the Russians fired an intermediate range missile in combat for the first time in history. And Russia is prepared to continue firing these. And this is a very dangerous escalation, especially if they start selecting targets outside of the borders of Ukraine.
Here's the comments from President Putin to which referred. It's pretty brief, but about as crystal clear as it could be.
Last night, we carried out a comprehensive strike using 90 missiles of similar classes and 100 drones. 17 targets were hit. These were military facilities, defense industry facilities, and their support systems. I repeat once again, on our part, these strikes took place in response to the continuous strikes on Russian territory by American ATACMS missiles. As I have said many times, there will always be a response from our side.
I repeat, these attacks took place in response to the use of American missiles to attack inside Russia, and we will always respond. Doesn't the State Department, doesn't the West Wing, forget about Joe Biden, does Donald Trump get this?
This is why, I mean, we may talk about a few, but this is why I'm holding an event on December 7th, because we need Congress to be mobilized and get it. We need Donald Trump to be mobilized and get it. We have to stop this madness. What Putin did there is, rather than hitting Ukraine with Oreshnik again, he came in and he took out critical infrastructure, including energy production facilities. This attack, it's not me saying this, this is every analyst, a minimum of 5 million Ukrainians will be fleeing Ukraine very shortly because they can't survive, because there is no heat and there will be no heat. They're going to flee to Europe. This is a refugee crisis that's taking place. If Putin carries out a similar attack of this nature using the weapons that he just described, the calibers, the Kinzhals and things of Iskanders, there'll be another 5 million. That's 10 million. That's almost half of the available population of Ukraine today being compelled to flee because they can't survive in Ukraine over the winter. That's what this stupid gambit towards ATACMS has done. The people who claim we want to help, we're compelling to flee for their lives into a Europe that's not prepared to take them. So they're going to suffer no matter what happens. And this is before, Putin says, okay, well, now we're going to bring in Oreshnik 2.0. I don't think Biden is being advised wisely because and we've talked about this before, there is a lack of Russian area expertise in the White House, in the National Security Council, in the CIA, in the State Department. They don't have genuine Russian experts anymore. They have Putin whisperers, Putin haters, people who can just go Putin, 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 everything. They don't understand Russia. Therefore, they're not in a position to understand, what motivates Russia and what, defines Russia and how Russia is going to behave. Instead, they've bought into this simplistic notion that Russia's bluffing, and that they will use ATACMS missiles regardless of the consequence, because ultimately Russia won't use nuclear weapons. This is a very dangerous thing. The intelligence community, the United States intelligence, the CIA, has come out and issued a series of assessments that always come to the same thing: Russia won't use nuclear weapons. But this is the same Russia House that gave us Russian collusion in 2016, which was a lie. It's the same. Right?
Does this crowd that advises and effectively makes American foreign policy agree with Admiral Buchanan that a nuclear war can be waged and won? Are they utterly delusional when it comes to the power of nuclear weapons?
Well, remember, this is the administration back in 2021, and I think also early in 2022, 2021. They came together, the permanent five of the Security Council, and reiterated a posture that began under Ronald Reagan, that nuclear wars can't be won, therefore they should never be fought, that is the fundamental principle. And indeed, Buchanan said this when he gave his remarks to CSIS last week. He said, we understand that nuclear wars can't be won, therefore they should never be fought. But then he turns around and says, but we're prepared to have a nuclear exchange with Russia where we prevail, where we win. I mean, the disconnect there is unreal. But this is what the policy requires him to say. That this is the insanity. This is why, ladies and gentlemen, we have to get rid of nuclear weapons, because the posture, the policy says we have to be prepared to use nuclear weapons to achieve an outcome favorable to the United States. But if we start off by saying, no matter what we do, we're going to lose, how can there be a favorable outcome? So why are we planning nuclear war that we can't win, but we're going to claim we're going to win, but we're going to lose and everybody's going to die? Nuclear weapons are insane, ladies and gentlemen, and we need to get rid of them.
You mentioned earlier a cold winter in Ukraine. How degraded is the military? How degraded is Ukraine society? How much longer can it last?
Well, the military is falling apart as we speak. I mean, this is the long-awaited collapse, and it's happening in accelerated fashion. Ukrainians are starting to surrender in numbers that haven't been seen since the beginning of the war. The conditions on the battlefield, even Ukrainian generals say it's unacceptable. We can't treat our wounded, we can't evacuate our wounded, we can't rotate people out. The troops on the front line are exhausted. They're dying or surrendering or retreating. 60,000 deserters so far this year, 60,000 deserters. So the military, they're running out of men, they're running out of equipment, they're running out of stamina, they're running out of everything. And eventually it's just going to be total collapse and rapid withdrawal. Societally, as I just said, 90% of the Ukrainian energy non-nuclear energy production is eliminated, not going to be repaired. It's gone. Whatever was left got hit. That means that 5 million Ukrainians are going to join the refugee path, and there's potential for 5 million more. The society is disappearing, literally erasing itself, because life in Ukraine is unsustainable, unsurvivable, which leads to political consequences. The Ukrainian, the president Zelensky right now, a recent poll, over 60% of the population said if there was a new election, they don't want him running. This guy went from being, a very popular president, wartime president, to being a president where 60% of the population is fed up with him. That's a bad number for Zelensky. And now he's moving into an impossible situation where he knows now he has to find a solution. I mean, now he's saying, okay, we'll temporarily give up control of our territories, whereas before he said he'll never consider that. Well, he has no choice. His policies are unrealistic, not going to happen. But you see the direction he's going. He's starting to concede to reality, because the reality is Ukraine is finished.
What tell us about your gathering on Saturday?
Well, I mean, this is not a trivial situation we find ourselves in. Many people I've talked to, American and Russian alike, say that the situation we're in today is more dangerous than the Cuban Missile Crisis. And one of the reasons is there just is no talking between Russia and the United States, no diplomatic interaction. The Cuban Missile Crisis was resolved by diplomacy. Right now, there is no diplomacy. And so something has to be done, or there will be a nuclear war. I'll say it one more time. Something has to be done, or there will be a nuclear war. And I've just, in reviewing it, the simplest thing is to get the United States to stop firing ATACMS missiles. And so in order to do this, we have to put pressure on Congress to take action, whether it's a hearing, whether it's a demand under the War Powers Act or something. And we have to get Trump mobilized. He ran on a policy to avoid war, avoid nuclear war, and yet he's silent, largely silent right now. We need his voice out there. So there's going to be 3 panels. The first panel that we're going to run, we were going to do an outdoor event, but the weather conspired against us, and it was tough to get permits. And I don't want to have 27-degree temperatures and 30 people waving a banner when I have all these great speakers doing. So instead, we rented the National Press Club. We'll have 3 panels. The first panel, Larry Wilkerson, Theodore Postal, Mel Goodman, CIA analyst, are going to talk about the dangers of nuclear war and just how real this threat is. The second panel will focus on how we put pressure on Congress. Leading up to this, I'll be going to Congress on the 5th to meet with members of the House Foreign Affairs Committee to talk about what can be done to get the Foreign Affairs Committee to put pressure on the Biden administration to stop the ATACMS attacks. And so we'll have a panel that will discuss the constitutionality of what Biden's doing and what Congress can do. And then the third panel is going to be focused on what the role that Trump should play. How do we put pressure on Trump? How do we mobilize MAGA to speak out to Trump, to get him to commit to no more ATACMS. I think if we can find a way to tell the Russians, look, even if we can't get Biden to stop the ATACMS, if Trump will come out and say, we're not going to do ATACMS attacks when I'm president, the Russians might say, okay, then we're going to ride this out. We're not going to escalate with Oreshnik and stuff. But if Trump remains silent, or worse, as what has happened, his national security advisor comes on TV and says, I've spoken with Jake Sullivan, and there's no distance between the Biden administration and us on what's going. Well, that tells the Russians then that what Biden's doing is going to continue on under Trump. And that means the Russians need to take action now rather than later. So that's what
this held to pay comment that he made just 2 hours ago reminds me of the comment made by Sebastian Gorka last week, for which he was roundly and soundly criticized, that if the Russians don't come to the negotiating table with us and with President Zelensky, the aid we've given Ukraine will look like peanuts compared to the aid we will give it next round. I don't know where these guys get these ideas from. They're as delusional as the people they're about to replace.
And Keith Kellogg's even worse. He's a man who knows nothing about Russia, and yet he's throwing out irrational, fanciful notions of a freeze of the combat lines, including leaving Ukrainian troops in Kursk. What part of that will never happen does he not understand? Russia's not losing this war, and that's what Donald Trump needs to understand. He needs to have people who brief him that say Russia not only is winning this war, but has won this war. And there's nothing we can do short of a nuclear war that kills everybody to stop that outcome. So all you'll do is make matters worse by going down these ridiculous policies as outlined by Gorka, Waltz, and Kellogg. You actually need to bring somebody in who can talk sense to you about what needs to be done to stabilize relations with Russia. And a key aspect of that is arms control. Not once has Trump talked about arms control. Not once has Trump taken responsibility for getting out of the INF treaty that enabled Russia to build the Oreshnik missile at all. And there's a follow-on event on December 8th at Busboys and Poets. I'm going to be doing a discussion and a book signing of my book, Disarmament: The Time of Perestroika. This is my memoir and history of the INF Treaty, of the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, of how we at one time succeeded in getting rid of these weapons. And I also postulate as a template of hope on what we could do in the future to resolve the situation we find ourselves in. And Larry Wilkerson will be moderating this and leading the discussion. And it's free. It starts at 7 p.m. And I think it's an important discussion we have to be having in relationship to all this. Stopping the ATACMS missile just stops the immediate pressure for nuclear war. But long term, we're going to need arms control. We're going to need disarmament. And right now, that nobody's even talking about that.
Let me say that I have happily participated in several events with you. They are organized with Marine Corps precision, and they are terrifically informative and challenging. And the speakers, all of whom I know and admire, are courageous to the hilt. Scott, best of luck to you. Thank you very much for joining us today.
December 2nd, and Matt Hoey is here with us. Welcome back, Matt.
Thanks, Nima.
Let's get started, Matt, with what's going on in Syria right now. I had few interviews with a reporter in the southern Lebanon. He has mentioned that how important Syria has been during the conflict between Israel and Lebanon, in terms of not just militarily, but in terms of medical care and all of this assistance that they've given to Lebanon. Right now, do you think how important is Syria, in your opinion, in the eyes of Israelis, and the way that and how do you see the conflict? Is that connected to the mindset of Israelis?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, Nima. And, we spoke just last Friday morning, and I don't think either of us had an appreciation for what was really occurring in Syria, how big the attack was, that this was coordinated with the Syrian National Army, which is a Turkish-backed, opposition. To call it that, that's what seems easy to call these guys, opposition, even though it's much more complicated than that. And it's interesting too, right? In the last weekend, over the weekend, I'm sure you saw this. I'm sure the folks who are watching saw as well. All these old ghouls, all these old, all the people from 6, 7, 8, 10 years ago who were wrong and terrible about Syria, who we hope we never see commenting ever again. They've all reappeared, like this, on my Twitter feed or my X feed. It's like I'm reliving 2013, with some of these people who are popping back up with their attestations and their analysis and their commentary on Syria. That is just, horrific. Again, this idea of like it's their opposition. I heard one guy, even Nima, talking about, this was on Al Jazeera. Heard one guy talking about how Hayat Tahrir Sham, HTS, which is the main Salafist jihadist organization, the organization that has taken Aleppo, moving south to Homs, that they practice constrained jihadism. I mean, just absolute nonsense. Just anyway. But to your question, I wanted to get that off my chest, so you can tell I'm annoyed by it. But this is very important to the Israelis. And the way I see this is, we've talked about this before, right? The idea that Israel is facing the axis of resistance, facing 6, 7 different adversaries, essentially. And it's better for Israel to take them apart one by one than to face them united. And that's what we've seen. You've seen the Israelis, while they have not destroyed the Palestinian spirit or desire or will for resistance, they certainly have degraded Hamas's military capabilities in terms of being able to conduct operations like October 7th in the short term. Hamas will be able to rebuild to get back to where they were, but in the immediate, I think the Israelis feel confident that they've reduced Hamas's ability to do such things. They've done the same with Hezbollah, whether it was they actually militarily degraded them, which I think is probably not the case, but certainly politically they were able to force a ceasefire deal with Hezbollah that takes Hezbollah out of the situation for now. So now moving on to Syria. I mean, so you just basically see Israel taking on one at a time, got into a position with Iran where essentially they've checkmated one another, where the idea of destroying each other's cities with missiles is rightfully unappealing to both sides. So they've both pulled back. The rhetoric is all there. The posturing is all there. The danger of it is still there. I hope no one gets me wrong thinking that we're clearing out and away from the danger of a massive regional war. We're not. But you see the Israeli strategy here in terms of going after one member of the axis of resistance at a time, playing out quite well for them. And of course, this was the dilemma that Iran has been in over the last several months, this idea that they can either continue this fight against Israel, where they may not be in the best position to do so, but they have to in order to support their allies, or see their allies picked apart one by one, as we've seen with Hamas and PIJ, Hezbollah, and now certainly Syria is off balance. This last week in Syria is the biggest event in Syria in years. And HTS has taken Aleppo, something that was never accomplished by these opposition Salafist, jihadist, Turkish-backed forces. So this is a big deal. It also puts into question, too, overall Turkey's role in this and how important Turkey is. And this morning, I did hear that the Syrian National Army, which is the rebranding of the Free Syria Army, which is the Turkish-backed, very overt. The Turks back HTS as well, just a lot more quietly, not as overtly. The Syrian National Army is Turkish. There's no doubt about it. But we reports this morning I saw with that the Syrian National Army had taken Kurdish positions. So you see the role in Turkey in this, in terms of trying to get something out of it for themselves. So allowing HTS to go on this offensive, which helps Israel. But the bigger thing for Turkey is that this allows Syrian National Army and potentially HTS as well to take Kurdish positions, weakening the Kurds. Because for the Turks, it's all about the Kurds, right? So this certainly is complex. This is the great game, if you will, at play. What we witnessed in the last decade in horrific fashion, where 500,600,000 were killed, millions upon millions made refugees and displaced, the nation completely destroyed, all for this type of geopolitical chessboard, real life game of risk conduct by the nations of the region, as well as the United States, Russia, and others.
How do you see the role of the Biden administration in the situation that we're witnessing right now in the Middle East? Are they trying to do something? Are they trying to, I don't know, to talk with the parties involved in the conflict?
I think
At
they're
least
doing.
with Turkey, they can talk with Turkey.
They should be able to talk with the Turks, but the Turks are going to do their own thing, and the Americans aren't going to do anything to really restrain the Turks. We certainly didn't restrain the Turks in the prior decade, during the Syrian war, and the Turks were carrying out proxy operations using HTS, previously al-Nusra, and other Islamist, jihadist, Salafist terror groups, essentially, to achieve their aims. And that melded with America's goal in Syria to destroy the Syrian government, remove Assad and his people from power, in order to hurt Iran in the American view, but also to help Israel in the sense of providing that, disallowing that connection between Iran, Iraq, and Syria with Hezbollah, which would then weaken Hezbollah, of course. But I think, as we said before, the priority for Israel is the Palestinians. And so it was not always this is for somehow, even though Hamas and the other Sunni factions of the Palestinians were aligned against Assad's government. And this gets very confusing and very complicated and doesn't make sense, and things get turned upside down real quick. The Israelis still saw the Sunni Islamist forces, for which the Israelis, there's a lot of evidence that the Israelis were backing in Syria, including a former Mossad chief. I think you showed the clip last time we were on. I was on with you, right? The former Mossad chief talking about how, yeah, we help the Al-Qaeda guys. We give them medical aid and everything else. If he's admitted to that, he's not admitting to all the other things they help them with. But the idea being that even though that they were aligned with Hamas nominally, that it would hurt Hezbollah, which their big fear with Hezbollah is, as we've seen in the last year, that Hezbollah can put pressure on them, the Israelis, to prevent them from doing to the Palestinians what they want. And of course, we've seen that play out over the last year. And now the Israelis have removed Hezbollah from the situation. They've moved on to trying to remove Syria from the situation. The Americans love it because the Americans are just obsessed with Iran. And this is, we talked about this again last time, I think, no better proof than this, than what Michael Vickers, who was the head of special operations and low intensity conflict for the United States under Barack Obama's administration, said in a Washington Post op-ed in 2017, I believe, that the best chance to hurt Iran was to destroy Syria, right? So it's not even about Syria for any of these nations that are involved. It's about other desires, other goals, other interests, other nations, and the Syrian people, much like how the Ukrainian people are being destroyed because of the US and the Brits and NATO's desire to hurt Russia. The same thing happened in Syria. And now we're seeing this played out again, where you're not seeing the desire of the West and regional actors in Syria and Israel is not about what occurs to Syria, what occurs to the Syrian people, but what effects they have on other nations that Israel, other nations and other groups that Israel, the U.S., the Turks, the Gulf states, etc., want to see happen.
Matt, there was an interview with Israel's Channel 2. It was an Israeli scholar of Arab culture, an ex-military intelligence lieutenant. His name is Mordechai Kedar. And he said that he's connected with these people, with these opposition groups and with these Syrian rebels. He's connected with them, that they want to have a better relationship with Israel.
Yeah.
They want to put Israeli embassy in Beirut and in Syria. do you think that in the mind of Israelis, it's unbelievable if they think that way, and because it's unbelievable, it's impossible to go in that direction. How is that possible to think that way?
They take the mindset, Nima, of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, which is something that people do in their own personal lives, let alone nation states over the course of humanity. The Israelis have long done this. When I was in Iraq back in 2004, 2005, I used to go up to Sulmania a lot, an Iraqi Kurdish province. And there was this brand new airport in Sulmania at that point. And I said, who built this? Where did this come from? And they said the Israelis built it because the Israelis wanted to use the Kurds against the Iranians, right? As well as to have a check against the Turks and against the Iraqis as well, the Syrians, of course. But you've seen for a long time, the Israelis, like the Americans, of course. I mean, with the Kurds, as far as I know, maybe even before this, the United States first started supplying weapons to the Kurds in 1973, the year I was born. So Nixon and Kissinger start sending weapons to the Kurds to destabilize the Iraqi government, in 51 years ago. And it probably predates that. That's probably just the limits of my knowledge on it. But you see these machinations, again, this great game, these imperial Machiavellian designs played out throughout the region that have certainly plenty of predecessors and antecedents in terms of historical actions, but we see it playing out now. And this thought somehow that the Israelis have that they're going to use HTS and these other jihadist forces for their own benefit, and that somehow it's going to work out exactly. It says all we got to need to do is give these guys some guns, some intelligence, soften up the Syrians by bombing them, and then when they take over, they're going to bend to our will, and they're going to do exactly as we say because they're going to owe us, and on and on and on. Except that the big thing is the enemy that linked you guys is now gone, and now you go back to and then alone this ahistorical thinking that somehow you can control these groups, that somehow they don't have their own agency, that somehow they don't really believe what they attest to, what they say they do. And you see this, of course, no better example than HTS itself, right? And Al-Nusra and Al-Qaeda, right? And where did Al-Qaeda come from? Let alone the Islamic State, which was previously Al-Qaeda in Iraq. And where did Al-Qaeda in Iraq come from? And of course, going all the way back to, Afghanistan and Al-Qaeda as a creation of American and Saudi and Pakistani intelligence services. I mean, so these nations keep playing with these Frankenstein's monsters that, and thinking that somehow the result is going to be different. But that's because of their arrogance. That's because of their entitlement. That's because of their belief that they are makers of history. And so the Israelis are as bad as the Americans in this. I mean, America is the imperial power of the world, but in the region, Israel is the imperial power. So they have the same mindset. And it's a colonial settler mindset. And people are familiar with the whole thinking behind Zionism, Greater Israel Project. So these people think that they can, like on a chessboard, they're all acolytes of Zbigniew Brzezinski and Henry Kissinger. And they think that this is the way to move forward, even in spite of the fact that history tells them otherwise. So yeah, I had seen that interview, and I think what the idea was we're going to give them guns and they're going to give us an embassy in Damascus or something like that. And it's just incredible. It's absolutely incredible that here we are again, witnessing this occurring in Syria, which we spent the better part of a decade watching in horror. And I don't know where it goes, or certainly it's been less than a week, this operation by HTS and the Syrian National Army. And so it's hard to get a handle on the wherewithal of both of those forces and what they can actually accomplish, as well as what can the Syrians do to oppose them. What will the Russians do? Vladimir Putin today said Syria has all the support that Russia can give it. Of course, the Iranians and the Iraqis have pledged their support. Hezbollah is moving their forces back into Syria. But one of the things I think that is not curious, but people have to look at and say, what the heck were the Syrians thinking? And I understand the reality, the reasons for why Idlib province existed. And Idlib is in the very northwest of Syria, bordering on Turkey. And that's where these jihadist forces, these Al-Qaeda remnants, had been contained. And as this, essentially they'd all been sent there. So this is one big jihadist camp, essentially, Idlib. And they have been allowed to be there for years, with their back door being Turkey. And this is why Turkey has such a key role in regards to HTS and these other forces, because the Turks controlled that border. The Turks controlled everything that got into Idlib. So basically, these forces were dependent upon Turkey, and they already had the relationship, they already had the association, but Turkey had this leverage over them, still does. But over this last year, they've been training, they've been organizing, they've been growing, very reminiscent of where Al-Qaeda in Iraq comes from. It comes to the Islamic State, how because the United States and Iraq put all these guys together in Camp Bucca. And of course, they talked and they coordinated and they worked with each other and they became this very strong force. And so, is that what happened here? And so, what's the real strength of this? Where is going to go? Will the Syrians be able to repel them, take back Aleppo, et cetera, et cetera? It's all things we'll have to wait and see. But I don't think anybody had this on their card for what was going to be happening in the region. I don't recall any analysts talking about re-engagement of the Syrian civil war in a way very serious. I think comments on Syria seem to be all related to essentially that the Israelis and the Americans are all going to continue to bomb them and, so on and so forth. And it would be mainly interdiction efforts by the Israelis against resupply Hezbollah. And that was what's the next 6 months, year was going to play out. And so I think this is very surprising. I don't know of anyone who predicted it. I know there was reports about a month or so ago, saying that Assad's forces, the Syrian government forces, may have tried to push into Idlib, to take out some of these HTS forces. But, that certainly is not what we got. And so I think everybody is still surprised and trying to figure out what happens next.
Yeah, it seems that it was a surprise attack, Matt. And right now, the question is, are they capable of keeping the situation the same way that it is right now? And on the other hand, if you remember, before 2020, there was a critical situation in Syria. And in 2020, they've reached an agreement, a ceasefire agreement between government in Syria and these people in these rebellions.
Right.
Do you think that the situation
with the Russians were the principal, principal,
and there was an agreement between Iran, Russia, and Turkey,
right,
about having some sort of demilitarized zone in Idlib and Aleppo. And right now, do you think the situation is more critical than it was before 2020, or is the same way in the eyes of the Syrian government?
I think it's more critical for the region because of the events of the last year. So this is just the new phase of this regional war. We talk a lot about like being worried about the regional war, and essentially we're in this regional war. But I think when we say we're worried, what we're worried about is a mass regional war. Cities being leveled, that type of thing. I think this is. I think because of everything that has led us to this point over this last year, we certainly are in a different spot than we were 4 years ago. I'll be interested to see what Israel does next. What Israel certainly with the ceasefire in Lebanon, which they violated some 50 times over the weekend or whatever. But I mean, their goal is clear, I think, to keep Lebanon out of their war with the Palestinians. And that this action in Syria does the same. Okay, so now what are they going to do about Yemen? And what are they going to do about? I don't think they'll do anything about Iraq because I think the Americans control Iraq to a degree. Yes, the Iranians may control the political system, but America controls its economic system. If people aren't familiar with it, the United States controls essentially the Iraqis' monetary reserves. So we essentially control Iraq because of that. Their money is in our bank in New York, and that's the way it is. I think the Israelis are comfortable with that the Iraqis won't do much of anything other than, the Islamic resistance of Iraq, sending rockets and drones and missiles like they have over the last year. But, that's not a big issue. What will the Israelis do about Yemen is another thing, because they are still blockading the Red Sea. It's causing a lot of problems, has been causing a lot of problems for the last year. I mean, their major southern port, Eilat, shut down, went bankrupt. I mean, Israel's economy is having all kinds of problems. I saw numbers last week that Israel's exports, both their exports and imports, have dropped about 35% over the last year. That's a horrific punch in the gut for the Israeli economy. And as we all know, the Israeli economy is bleeding out anyway. So what will Israel do about Yemen, I think, is what will occur next. And we'll see. I mean, Yemen poses a much greater challenge for the Israelis and for the Americans by extension. Whenever I say Israelis, I think people understand that connotates the Americans as well. What will be done about Yemen? I mean, certainly the United States Navy has failed in its mission over the last year. They lost the biggest, as the U.S. Navy likes to say, the biggest naval battle since World War II. Well, guess what? The U.S. Navy lost it. And what will be done there to try and get Yemen, Ansar Allah, the Houthis, to relent and to give up their blockade. They're not going to do that until they're either forced to do it, which again, I don't know how it's possible, or the genocide in Gaza stops.
And the question is, Matt, the backers of the government in Syria are Iran and Russia. Russia is involved right now in the conflict in Ukraine. How, in your opinion, how is the conflict in Ukraine is the conflict in Ukraine connected with what's going on in Syria or not? Because we've learned from various reports recently, we had the Ukrainian intelligence being in that region helping these groups. How is that related to the conflict? The conflict in Ukraine is related to the conflict in Syria.
Right, and we've seen reports of Ukrainian intelligence in Africa aligning with Salafist jihadist Islamist forces in Africa to try and go after Russian forces that are in Africa, primarily Wagner forces. And of course, we have to remember, go back to March, it was when you had that horrific attack on the concert hall in Moscow, that the Russians said this was Ukrainian intelligence behind this Islamic State attack. And so you see this relationship that exists with the Ukrainians, with these various Islamist forces throughout the world, the Middle East, Central Asia, as well then Africa. And that, of course, is right out of the American playbook. The relationship between the United States and these type of forces is well known. It goes back decades. It was certainly there in Syria. The evidence for that is overwhelming. Essentially, you've had people such as President Obama and the former Secretary of State John Kerry say it out loud. I think Joe Biden said it as well at one time, that this is what was occurring there, as well as plenty of people who could speak to it, including leaked Defense Intelligence Agency documents. I had a friend of mine talk to me about it who was at DIA at the time. This was summer of 2012. This is what we're doing. We're trying to use these guys to overthrow Assad. It's going to blow up in our faces. And it did. Certainly the relationship between the American intelligence services and the Ukrainian intelligence services, it's father-son type of relationship. So the fact that you see this Ukrainian involvement should not be a surprise. And it makes sense. I mean, it does make sense. If Ukraine is in this war against Russia, Russia has these interests and these outposts and these exposures, the ability to be exposed outside of Russia itself, then Ukraine should try and take advantage of it. That just kind of seems what any nation would attempt to do. But the reality is, who is Ukraine aligning themselves with? It speaks volumes as to actually who the Ukrainians themselves are. So not surprised at all to see that there's potential or that there is Ukrainian involvement in this. Again, the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing. But also it tracks with what we have seen. I'm sorry, hang on a second. Okay, sorry, something popped up on my screen. But there's also tracks with how the Americans do business for decades in terms of going after their enemies using these, again, Frankenstein monsters. And so I think Ukraine is probably a lot, and I should say probably, Ukraine is a lot less vulnerable though to the blowback of working with these forces in Central Asia, in the Middle East, and in Africa than the United States is. So I think the Ukrainians feel quite confident in continuing that relationship.
Do you think that in Syria right now, is the government, how much are they, how much do they need the support coming from Russia? Because we know Russia is totally involved in the conflict in Ukraine, and they're so busy there, and because they're fighting everybody there. Right now, how much do they need Russian army on their part right now? We know that Iranian are sending troops, not Iranian troops, are sending their forces, the Iranian-backed forces to Syria right now. But how much Russia is involved there right now?
I think the biggest thing of support that the Syrians will likely be looking for from the Russians is, logistics support, supply, particularly, munitions, oil, fuel, as well as intelligence support. And those are things that the Russians likely can give them. Certainly in terms of making sure that these cadres that are coming from Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, Yemen, wherever they're going to be coming from, Lebanon, of course, have the ammunition they need, have the fuel for their vehicles, have the batteries for their radios, and so forth. The Russians can provide that. I think everyone understands the strength of the Russian economy, particularly its military-industrial base. It can provide those things. Whether or not the Russians can provide, I know I said intelligence before, but can dedicate intelligence assets to the Syrians like they did previously to help these forces engage with the opposition, as well as then to provide the air support. I don't know if Russia has the attack aircraft and the attack helicopters available to provide to Syria like they did in the previous iteration of the war. I simply don't know. And that would be a huge, huge loss to the Syrians not to have that air support, particularly as you see the ability of HCS and the Syrian National Army to move in open columns down the road. These are the videos you're seeing. You're saying, where the heck is the air? Where are the attack aircraft? Where are the attack helicopters? So that might be something that they don't have. The intelligence, again, the ISR, the intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance assets may be much more limited than previously. But I think in terms of providing the weapons, the ammunition, the batteries, the fuel, etc., that the Syrians will need to fight this, that shouldn't be a problem from the Russians.
Whenever we talk about Donald Trump, people are talking about that he's unpredictable. Right now, the situation with Erdogan in Turkey right now, do you think that he's unpredictable because recently he was talking about the situation if you remember, before Israel attacking Lebanon, he said, if they go there, I'll send my army to help Hezbollah. But he didn't do anything at the end of the day. Right now, he knows how important Syria is for Lebanon and how important Lebanon is for the conflict in Gaza, and why he has decided to do this right now. It's unbelievable.
Because he sees the advantage with the Kurds. He sees the advantage. This is a chance to weaken the Kurds. Yeah, I think that's it. He puts his priorities over the priorities of the. I think he expects his political base to be supportive, that his nationalist Turkish base to be supportive of this, because it goes after the Kurds. And it's nice to talk about the Palestinians. It's nice to talk about the Lebanese. It's nice to speak against the Israelis. And it sounds good. And the rhetoric is terrific and everyone likes it. But the reality is the Kurds are the most important thing for the Turks. And I think this is ultimately what's attempted to be accomplished there. I think, who knows, maybe, I don't know if the Turks expected HTS to seize Aleppo. They probably didn't care. All they wanted was a distraction, a big show to allow the Syrian National Army to move into Kurdish positions. And like I said, out of this morning, they've done that. So we'll see how the Kurds react. And then, of course, we'll see how the Americans react. But the only thing the Americans care about is, well, Americans are a little different, I think, in the sense that we will prioritize Israel over everything. We'll prioritize Israel over our own country. Seeing that, I mean, go a few hours east, or basically a few hours west from where I live, and we've got about a $35 billion, $40 billion unpaid bill to repair and rebuild and reconstruct after Hurricane Helene, and no one knows who's going to pay it. But we're going to send another however many billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars to Israel in the next fiscal year. The $23 billion that we provided this past year, it'll be at least that much, maybe more. So the Americans will do everything to help Israel, but then also too, they are obsessed with Iran, particularly some of the people coming in the Trump administration, as well as some people in the Biden administration. So the idea that, how will the United States respond to their Kurdish allies being attacked will be viewed through the prism of what's best for Israel, and does this hurt Iran? And so, we'll have to, I think, wait and see what the Americans do.
Do you think that Donald Trump's presidency would bring new assassinations to the region?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think so. I think both. I think, one, the people he's got coming in, Tulsi Gabbard at DNI, she has spoken fondly of assassinations before, primarily drone strikes, and I don't know enough about John Ratcliffe. I think I just don't know enough about him at CIA. He's probably going to do whatever the CIA people want to do, and CIA special operations, their paramilitary folks, this is their life. This is what they live for. So that's what they're going to be pushing for. I think you have plenty within the Trump administration who, you look at a Mike Waltz and a Sebastian Gorka, who's, incoming national security advisor and a deputy national security advisor, and how they talk, how they speak. Gorka hasn't done anything with his life that seems to have anything to do with the real world that I can tell. But Waltz certainly has. Waltz was an American Special Forces operation, a number of deployments. He does know what he's talking about. But he is a fantasist. He's a fabulist. His view of the world is it's imperial, to say the least. And in others like Marco Rubio, who's taken over the State Department, when his comments regarding Israel's pager and beeper and walkie-talkie attacks back in September, was it, in Lebanon, he was talking about it like he had just seen an episode or scene from James Bond, and how great this was, right? Or this was wow, did you read that? I just read this chapter in his latest Tom Clancy novel, and holy cow, that's how these people think. And so I think you have people like Rubio and Gorka who believe that stuff, Waltz, who is a creature of this, and then others like, Ratcliffe taking over CIA, who I can't speak that much about him, except I get the feeling that he's going to let the CIA do whatever they want to do. And then Trump is the most malleable president we've ever had. And they're going to go in and they're going to talk to him, and he's going to believe that this stuff is going to work. And the problem, Mr. President, why it didn't work in your last administration when we were doing these assassinations in Iran all the time, is we just didn't do enough of them. And you were dead right, Mr. President, to kill Qasem Soleimani. The problem is we didn't kill more. We just didn't do enough of it. We didn't kill enough, right? On and on and on. And I think that's what we're looking at in a lot of ways with this Trump administration. But again, who knows? He's unpredictable. This is why, reportedly the Russians, not reportedly, Vladimir Putin said it at one point back in February or March, and in other, sources coming out of Russia, why the Russians favored Joe Biden, even though he was so antagonistic in Europe, even though he was, dead set on this war in Ukraine, willing to go up to the line of nuclear war over it. The Russians at least felt he was predictable. And with Trump, they can't predict what he's going to do. And I think that's how most of the world feels about him.
Matt,
With the exception of the Israelis. The Israelis, I was just in Palestine, as we talked about, and the Israelis absolutely love Donald Trump. We had a soldier at one point get on our van at a checkpoint, and when he got off, big smile on his face that he said, "Make America great again with Trump." And you saw that over and over again. The Israelis, they love Trump in a way that you can't appreciate unless you're there.
Matt, you've heard about a new type of bomb that Israelis are using in Gaza. It seems that it makes a terrifying sound, and I've heard about it. The Ministry of Health in Gaza says that anybody near to 200 and 300 meter to this attack, to this bomb, is going to be vaporized. And do you think Israelis are making, or I don't know, are they trying to make a new experiment in Gaza with these new bombs? And what do we know about this new bomb? Have you heard about it?
Yeah, I saw the press release on it. I haven't seen any analysts or experts say what they think it is. In my mind, I think it might be a fuel air explosive, but I don't know. But the Israelis forever have been using the Palestinians as lab rats. One of the best writers on this for people to read about this phenomenon of using the Palestinians, whether in Gaza or in the West Bank, as experimental subjects for these weapons tests, is a guy named Anthony Lowenstein. And people should look up his work. He's written a couple books on this. He is probably the most informed person I know in the sense of understanding how Israel uses Palestine as a weapons laboratory. They also use it in other ways too. They use it for commercial purposes. When I was just there in Palestine, had a gentleman who was involved in the IT community in Palestine explaining how sometimes the Israelis will push technologies into Palestine, commercial technologies, cell phone technologies, say, switchboards and things like that, to test them in a live setup. And get all the bugs worked out. Does this thing really work? What we'd have to do to fix it, using it in a real world setting, because they've got the Palestinians captive as their lab rats. So both with weapons and commercial purposes, they use the Palestinians as test subjects to better their products that they then turn around and sell to the world. I don't know if that's the case with this weapon system, or if it's actually a weapon system that the Israelis are just deploying for the first time. But I'm not certain what it is. I haven't seen any experts. If people in the comments have seen it, it'd be helpful if you throw it in there. If people have seen stuff in terms of what this might actually be. But it's not surprising to hear this, that you're seeing experimental weapons used against the Palestinians, because that's what the Israelis have been doing for years and years and years.
That is, when you look at the conflict in Gaza, and if you consider what has happened during the last 12 months, the conflict in Gaza, then they started with Lebanon, Iran, and right now in Syria. It seems that they're doing each and everything at their disposal to distract us, to distract everybody from what's going on in Gaza.
Right.
And what do we know about the situation in Gaza right now?
Oh, it's hard to say. It's been 400 days, and the situation's worse than it's been. So this genocide just continues to evolve. I heard this morning that 200 people have been killed in Gaza in airstrikes on Saturday alone. The targeting of on Saturday, the Israelis killed one of the chief medical officers, one of the top surgeons in Gaza, assassinated him. And the next day they assassinated the man who runs a large soup kitchen, So, they're deliberately targeting those who are not opposing them, but are trying to keep Palestinians alive. And we've seen this. They killed another journalist again from Al Quds network yesterday, I believe it was. So, you're seeing the continued destruction of a people and focusing on destroying those who are trying to save the people, as well as destroying those who are trying to tell about this. I mean, so when I was at the Gaza border, this was 2 weeks ago today, we were a couple kilometers from where the built-up area of northern Gaza would be, and you couldn't see anything. It kind of plays tricks on you because 2 kilometers, 2.5 kilometers to where that is, and you should be able really to see the buildings quite well, and they weren't there. I mean, the whole thing's been leveled, and you go back and you find other photos to make sure what you were looking at was kind of what you were looking at, and you realize what you'd seen was just this destruction in Gaza. What we could see was we didn't witness any airstrikes or anything like that while we were there. There was smoke from burning, and whatever that was burning, whether it be a house, a apartment building, a mosque, a school, whatever. There were pillars of smoke, but for the most part, what we saw were these huge clouds of dust that were most likely from the Israeli earth-moving equipment. Maybe their tanks and armored vehicles moving around, but it was so concentrated, so heavy that this looks like, as they make or remake Gaza in their image, using that earth-moving equipment to carry out the next phase of their genocide. So as we continue to see the destruction of the people, we continue to get more information about how widespread the deliberate destruction has been. There's a United Nations report that came out late last week that detailed a lot of the destruction. For instance, 70% of agricultural land has been destroyed in Gaza. 83% of plant life has been destroyed in Gaza. I mean, that goes for anything you can think of. The Israelis, that's anything you can think of that supports a society. The Israelis have deliberately destroyed it. And so I think this next phase then is essentially what we're seeing with that earth movement equipment, separating, continuing to really define that separation between North and Central Southern Gaza. And the people in the North in the last 5 weeks, 6 weeks, maybe longer, under the general's plan, as it's called, named after retired General Island, giving the options of surrender or starve, or essentially get out of here or starve to death. Also, a lot of targeted killing, a lot of wholesale just killing of groups of people, making it impossible to live in northern Gaza, trying to get people pushed out. And those that do remain in northern Gaza will be put into essentially concentration camps. We've seen the reporting already about how American companies, Israeli companies will come in and administer these camps. The mercenaries, these development organizations that are, nothing more than war enablers, they will come in and backfill the IDF, and these people will be in concentration camps, and they'll be able to leave. They'll never be able to come back. The camps will be utterly horrific. They will be starved to death inside those camps. They'll be so miserable. And of course, the violence will continue. The idea being eventually they will leave. And then, of course, the settlers will come in. And Danielle Weiss, who is a prominent settler in Israel, maybe the most prominent, she has already said that she's got 750 families lined up to move into Gaza this year. And in south of Gaza, I think the Israelis just essentially will continue what they're doing. And they'll continue bombing the hell out of it, starving it. Anyone tries to get the water system back up and running, they'll kill them. But I think the Israeli mindset towards the millions that will be in southern Gaza, the 1.8, 1.9 million, however many are left in the central and southern Gaza, we'll worry about them later. We'll figure something out. Maybe something will come along and the Egyptians will open their border, or the Jordanians will take them, or all these ships will show up and take them to South America. I think the Israelis essentially, we're going to figure that out later. But from that next part, we're going to do what we're going to do with Gaza: concentration camps, money making, for these companies, and resettlement. And then, of course, they've gotten Hezbollah off their northern border now. Hopefully, the idea being Netanyahu can campaign then on, look, we defeated Hezbollah, we killed Nasrallah, we forced Hezbollah to back beyond the river. Our people were able to go back to the north. This is a victory. Because people remember back in the summer when Israel was beginning its operations against Lebanon, this was something that was prominently said by the Israeli government. We are going to, this is a goal of the war now. We are linking Lebanon to Palestine, to Gaza, and that goal of this war is to get our people back into their homes in northern Israel. And it looks as if the Israelis may be able to do that. So a big political win for Netanyahu, a big domestic win for Netanyahu. And certainly the Israelis will do as they want in southern Lebanon. Again, as I said before, they've already violated the ceasefire like 50 times. We can expect that to occur. And essentially what southern Lebanon will look like, some people will be allowed to come back, but it will be, I think, mainly depopulated and in many ways a free fire zone for the Israelis. And what has Hezbollah recovers from this, how they move forward with this. I'd like to think that Hezbollah's taking of this ceasefire, accepting of this ceasefire is a necessary strategic pause for them, that along with the Iranians and the others, they've said, okay, let's pull back for a moment. We're overextended here. The Israelis are beating up really badly on us one at a time. Let's figure out how to go forward with this. I'd like to think that's what's occurring there, as opposed to Hezbollah just having to say, you know what, this is politically not possible for us. We cannot subject our people to this destruction for the sake of another people. Militarily, we've been degraded. Our command and control is worse than we let on. Israeli attacks really did have an effect on us. Hopefully that's not the case, but you have to consider that. That may have been the case. And now, of course, with this weakening of the Syrians, Israel is in a pretty good position regionally. They got to figure out what to do with Yemen. They're in a checkmate situation with Iran. But, again, they've got the Americans to control the Iraqis. Israel is in a pretty good place regionally, much better than, if you rewind us back 4 weeks or so, Nima, and hear what I said, certainly I wasn't getting any of this correct. I don't think none of us were getting any of this correct in terms of where the Israelis were heading with their strategy. So, maybe I'm misreading this and, but I think that's what we're looking at here, a situation in the region dramatically different than it was just a few weeks ago.
Thank you so much, Matt, for being.
Syrian girl, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm honored to be here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited to get your insight on this. Interested, really. Okay. Syria, what in the heck? This was a surprise. This was a surprise attack that now, first of all, where is Assad and what have the rebels taken over?
Well, there's been some propaganda that Assad is hiding in Moscow and he's going to run away, a lot of stuff like that. In reality, he is actually in Damascus right now, who is photographed yesterday meeting the Iranian foreign minister. So he's in Damascus, he's in the capital.
So he's not leaving. He's sticking around for now, because there were some reports that he had fled the country, that he is out of there, that Syria is completely fallen. But he's still in Damascus. Go ahead.
Apologize. Well, this is the kind of similar propaganda we've been hearing for the last 14 years. It feels like 2012 all over again, where, 2012 called, they want their propaganda back, where we were told Assad is going to cut and run at any moment. He's not going away.
Yeah. So who are these rebels and how much of the country have they taken at this point?
So they've taken the second largest city of Syria, which is Aleppo, which is the second most populated city after Damascus. So it is quite, maybe not in area, but in location, they've taken a very important point. Who these rebels are, they are led by a group called Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which is previously called Jabhat al-Nusra, which is Al-Qaeda. And they are designated a terrorist group by the United States and the UK. And they are linked to Al-Qaeda because their leader, Jolani, was one of the founding members of Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which became ISIS. And, they've tried to rebrand the thing. They've tried to clean it up, but the reality is it's Al Qaeda, and that's who it is.
Yeah, at this point, I think they say,
Essentially.
"Well, we're different now. We're moderate. We're different, right?" But it's Al Qaeda. It's Al
Yeah.
Qaeda, and this was a group
Yes.
that did the U.S. support this group? What sort of funding, weapons, or support have they received from the United States?
Well, here's the thing. You know, during the Hillary Clinton email leaks, Jake Sullivan told her that Al Qaeda is on our side in Syria in plain text. And that went everywhere. And it was highly embarrassing for the United States. So back then, they knew that they were backing Al Qaeda. But in order to sort of clean up the image, they designated Hayat Tahrir al-Sham as a terrorist organization sometime after those leaks came out. But they continued to support other rebel groups that were fighting alongside them and were supporting them. This was Operation Timber Sycamore, which was a CIA operation to arm and train the Syrian quote unquote rebels to fight Assad. Now, they couldn't call them democracy fighters, they couldn't call them any sort of name that they would usually go with. So they called them the moderate rebels. And the whole notion of them being moderate what? They never tell you. Like, what they mean is moderate Islamists, right? They mean moderate head choppers. And the thing is, with the CIA program and why it was eventually shut down is because it became gradually more embarrassing. The CIA asked, well, the US asked the quote unquote Syrian rebels to differentiate themselves from Al Qaeda. And all of the rebel groups came out and said, "We are all Jabhat al-Nusra." And not only are they like allied to them, they also were doing the same exact actions. One of the CIA-backed rebel groups, Al-Zinki, beheaded a 12-year-old boy on camera in Aleppo in 2016, and you can just guys look it up. Like the video is online, and in the video, which I unfortunately had to watch, they said we are worse than ISIS. So it's obvious that the US was fueling and funding Al Qaeda in Syria, and they still are, but they're doing it through their Turkish proxies because Turkey, at the end of the day, is part of NATO, and Turkey is the biggest push behind this Al Qaeda group, which is the now basically the main group in Syria. All the other groups have pledged allegiance and kind of dissolved away. This is the major group that's left in Syria.
Right. And they don't claim to be Al Qaeda, but they're basically Al Qaeda. I mean, they're essentially, maybe they're not linked to the group officially anymore because they're a breakaway, but it's Al Qaeda. I mean, that's what this is. Okay, let's get back. Let's roll the clock back and let's get to how this all started, because what the US government has been claiming all of this time is that Assad is a dictator. He's a brutal dictator. He gasses his own people. And we have been on, and we're supporting basically this pro-democracy movement that happened during the Arab Spring. So the Arab Spring happens, people are rising up, they want to get rid of the dictator, and we're going to help them do it. And that's been the narrative. But who were these people? During the Arab Spring, and maybe there was a legitimate uprising of people that didn't want to be ruled under Assad anymore, but maybe that got taken over by these, Islamist rebels that are not pro-democracy at all. I mean, who was the uprising that happened back during that Arab Spring in Syria?
Well, it started off as the Muslim Brotherhood, which was a banned organization in Syria for decades. The uprising was led by the Muslim Brotherhood. The US knew that. The Syrian National Council, which was the de facto fake government that the US set up to take over from Assad, which was located in Turkey, 80% of its members were Muslim Brotherhood members. So from the very beginning, that's what it was. It has nothing to do with democracy or freedom or human rights. So it immediately had an element of sectarianism, because from the very beginning they were protesting when they were coming out of the mosques. They were saying about the minority groups in Syria, Christians to Beirut and Alawis to uh, to the grave. Alawis being like a Shia sect in Syria. So essentially, this is the worst element of the Syrian society that aren't representative of the majority of the Syrian people that the US decided to arm. And if we can go back even before the Arab Spring, I mean, we can't claim that this hasn't been planned since the beginning, because the Clean Break policy document, which was an Israeli basically a policy, outlined their goals to begin with. So they wanted to destroy the Oslo Accords. They wanted the United States to overthrow Saddam Hussein. And in that document, they also said they need to follow up with a war in Syria and Lebanon and then Iran. So it's really, it's just a, essentially planned all along. So we don't really have to talk about whether it was legitimate or not, because we know this was a conspiracy.
So what is Turkey's, what is their motivation in this? Who have they been backing and why?
Well, from the beginning, they were backing the Muslim Brotherhood, and that is because Erdogan himself is, his party is linked to the Muslim Brotherhood. So he also was part of the original operation that, the United States and Saudi Arabia, which also was involved in Operation Timber Sycamore to fund the rebels, quote unquote. They had a plan to get rid of Bashar al-Assad, weaken Iran's influence in the region, normalize with Israel, and get an oil pipeline through Syria, basically under a new regime. So that is the original plan. But slowly, people started to check out of this plan. Specifically, Saudi Arabia, the new MBS prince, he kind of felt like maybe these Muslim Brotherhood guys would actually be a threat to his monarchy. Because with the Muslim Brotherhood, they want an election, essentially. They want to have them select Erdogan or vote for him. And so they're like Muslim Democrats in a sense. It's the worst of both worlds in terms of what the monarchists want. So MBS does not want democracy in Saudi Arabia, and he realized that this could cause some blowback. And so there was some friction and tension between Turkey, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia and the UAE, if you remember. That doesn't mean that he didn't want to continue to normalize with Israel. He still did. But he started to hesitate on backing this war in Syria. And also, the United States put more of its resources into backing Kurdish groups in order to try to balkanize Syria in accordance with the Israeli Oded Yunon plan, which instructed to basically take everything east of the Euphrates and give it to Kurdish groups, because the Israelis intend to occupy everything west of the Euphrates in a greater Israel plan. So that's what the US decided to go with. And actually, that was the Pentagon and not the CIA that was driving that. So Turkey was essentially left holding all the Syrian refugees and these terrorist groups, which they were afraid would blow back onto Turkey. So Erdogan, he had a ceasefire agreement with Iran and Russia and Syria in 2018 in Astana. And this thing held for 6 years. But during that time, the Al Qaeda forces were building up. The sanctions on Syria were crippling Syria's efforts to build back up. So it was a war of attrition that Syria was going through for 6 years, which culminated in this current blitzkrieg on Aleppo. So the Astana agreement essentially failed because Erdogan stabbed everybody in the back and went ahead with this force. And one of the reasons that I suspect he did this is because he wanted to get rid of these guys. He just wanted to burn them so that they wouldn't blow back onto Turkey. And he's essentially afraid of them more than anything.
Where do the
I'm not
Kurds
talking about
fit into all
Al-Qaeda
of
here.
this? Yeah. Where do the Kurds fit into all of this?
Well, the Kurds, what Erdogan wanted from Assad was, even a few months ago, Erdogan was asking to meet Bashar al-Assad in person in order to have some sort of agreement. But Bashar said that there's no way I'm going to meet you unless you commit to pulling forces out of Syria, and that's a non-negotiable. So obviously something between them during the negotiations broke down, and I suspect it also has to do with the Kurds, because what he wanted was to go and smash all the Kurdish groups. The Kurds, on the other hand, they have been overplaying their hand. They have been working with the United States and maintaining their occupation, which has also weakened the Syrian state, because all of Syria's oil fields, almost like 80% of them, all the wheat fields, they're all in the east of the country, which the US occupies. So Syria couldn't fuel itself or feed itself for all of these years. And the Kurdish groups have supported that. They have allowed that. And, in the east of the country, they are not even the majority of the, they're a minority. They're not a majority. They're not an ethnic majority in the areas that they're trying to control, unlike what you're being told probably in the US media. But now how they're going to fit in is that these forces are going to go in, and they've already kind of taken over swaths of a Kurdish-held territory. The question is Erdogan going to go east of the Euphrates? Now, he's already done that. He's already sort of done that with Operation Euphrates Shield, which at the time when he called Trump to let him know that Turkish forces are going to go in to Kurdish-held areas east of the Euphrates, Trump agreed to pull out of Syria, because Erdogan told him, look, Turkish forces, which are NATO, may unfortunately kill US forces if they're embedded with the Kurds. And he's sort of facing the same scenario now, but it's even more complicated, because Iraqi PMU forces, the Popular Mobilization Forces, are also now coming into Syria from the Syrian-Iraqi border, moving up through Al-Qaim border crossing, which is kind of creating a cauldron where the United States occupation forces are going to be surrounded from both sides. Both armies are going to clash, and they're going to be in the middle. So the biggest, most important thing now is to try to push Trump to get the troops out. Unfortunately, he's beholden to Miriam Adelson and Jared Kushner and the AIPAC money, which want the United States to suicide itself for Israel. And that will involve their forces in Syria and Iraq getting crushed. But that is what Israel wants, and what Israel wants, Israel gets in US politics, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately. I mean, it seems right now that, for one, this is such a complicated, this is a complicated conflict where there's a lot of different parties at play with their own interests. And I don't even know how many you've got the Turks, you've got the Israelis, you've got the Iranians, the Russians, you also have Hezbollah's in the mix there. And you have US, obviously the United States is there as well. And then of course there's Syria and their own interests. And then there's these Al-Qaeda groups, right? The rebels, the supposed rebel groups. So you've got so many different groups, and they all have, it doesn't seem like any of them have the same agenda as the other group. I mean, it's like 7 different groups with 7 different agendas. And sometimes the agendas align, and sometimes they're at odds with one another. And so this just ends up being this constant cycle of insanity that's going on in Syria. But it looks like the main player that benefits the most is Israel. They're the group that they win. I mean, they're ecstatic over this. They're joyous over this. Now this is going to cut off weapons to Hezbollah, also to Hamas. This is going to tie up more of the Hezbollah fighters. This is going to, Russia's got its own thing going on in Ukraine, so they can't really necessarily rush in to help Syria right now. Iran's got its own issues as well. So everybody seems really tied up with their own problems. And this was just a really great opportunity for Israel to, whether they were involved in this or not in some way. I mean, in my mind, I always look at, whenever there's any conflict, I always look at who benefits the most or has the greatest need or desire to benefit from something. And that is likely who maybe is pulling the strings behind the scenes. What do you think about that? Do you think that Israel is just lucky? They just got lucky, and these Al-Qaeda fighters just saw that everybody was tied up and now's the time, we're going to take advantage of this, and it was just their own strategic genius? Or do you think that Israel was actually somehow involved in this, because Israel is certainly the biggest benefactor of this?
Well, I think you took the words out of my mouth. This whole thing is not a coincidence that it happened just when the ceasefire was declared in Lebanon. And during the ceasefire, Hezbollah aimed to regroup and rearm. And who is the group that provides the armaments for Hezbollah? It's Syria. They get their guns from the factories which are in Aleppo. So, all of the missile factories and whatnot have now been overrun by Al-Qaeda terrorists who hate Hezbollah way, way, way more than they do Israel, if they hate Israel at all. Because in fact, Israel has been giving medical treatment. So during the war, the Al-Qaeda terrorists actually moved all the way down to the Golan Heights border. And they were being given medical treatment by Israel and arms as well. So Netanyahu even visited some of these fighters in the hospital. So the ex-Mossad chief went on Al Jazeera and he was interrogated about this by Mehdi Hassan, which is another story, but he did a good job in that interview. And the guy essentially said, well, we're doing it for humanitarian reasons. And so he asked him, would you do this for Hezbollah? He goes, no, we have a different account with Hezbollah because Al-Qaeda has never attacked Israel. And he's like, but they've attacked the United States. So I would encourage you guys to read that, listen to that video. Israel is backing the rebels in Syria. And even recently when the head of Hezbollah, Sayed Nasrallah, was killed, the rebels in Idlib put up a poster in Hebrew saying, thank you, Netanyahu. It's obvious that they're doing this now in order to help Israel prevent Hezbollah from rearming so that the genocide in Gaza can continue. And Turkey, even though Erdogan talks a big game that he's against Israel for his constituents so that he can get elected, at the end of the day, Turkey still recognizes the state of Israel. They've normalized relations with them and they're giving them fuel. He's only saying that because he doesn't want to revolt against him. Look at what they do, not what they say. Syria is kind of like a Mexican standoff. Everybody's got his gun pointed at everybody else. But I think if you really boil it down, as you said, to who benefits, this is a war between Israel and Syria. And Syria has its allies and Israel has its allies.
Right, because I mean, what does the United States care if Assad is a dictator? I mean, do we care about the Saudi royal family? They're dictators. That's a dictatorship. I mean, it's a monarchy. We don't care about democracy. This whole illusion of, well, it's about supporting democracy when we're doing business with plenty of monarchies around the world, or at least in the Middle East. So that is just that's a total, that's just made up. It's completely and totally made up. And quite frankly, I would imagine that the Syrian people would much rather, if they have to choose between Assad or Al-Qaeda, they would rather be under the rule of Assad. There is nothing democratic about what Al-Qaeda is planning on doing or what they are doing. I mean, I'm hearing reports from people that have family in some of these towns in Syria that the women are now being told they need to cover up. So people that are in religious minorities are afraid that life is going to change drastically for them. They no longer will be living in a secular state, that they're going to be forced sort of like Taliban light. I mean, that's what this group rolling in is, very similar to the Taliban in a lot of their viewpoints and what they would like
It's
to.
way worse than the Taliban. You
think it's worse? Why? How do you think they're worse?
Yes. Because if you've seen, they have been beheading people in the streets. They beheaded the soldiers they captured, then they shot them. But they've also been rounding up. So basically, the army actually retreated from Aleppo. So not a lot of the soldiers were captured. So what they decided to do then was to just round up all the males of fighting age and walk them through the desert and said, this is the Syrian army. And they're probably going to start executing them, unfortunately. And it's just exactly like Israel did, where they raided a hospital, they took all the doctors and patients, and they dragged them out in their underwear, and they said this is Hamas because they can't actually catch Hamas; they're under the ground. So it's very similar tactics to Israel. I mean, at the very least, the Taliban is a little bit more of a rational actor than the crazies in Syria. You know, the Taliban is willing to work on itself and make some deals with Russia and China, whereas these people are just insane and they're head choppers essentially.
I just don't. So what is the U.S. going to do? I mean, what do you think? That's the big question that's circulating in the mainstream news: is who's the U.S. going to back at this point? I mean, now you've got these fighters who the U.S. finally did designate as a terrorist organization after arming them, supporting them. There's a lot of suspicion, at least in my mind, that Israel. I mean, this is just such a wonderful thing for Israel as far as their battle with Hamas and Hezbollah, that it's hard to imagine they didn't have a role in it somehow, that this wasn't something that, you know, I'm sure that this Al-Qaeda group, I don't know if they're working directly on behalf of Israel. I'm sure they have their own agenda as well, just like all of the groups in Syria seem to have their own agendas. But in this particular case, their agenda aligns. And that is take over Syria, kick out Assad, ensure that weapons don't go further towards, that weapons don't continue to flow to Hezbollah or to Hamas from Iran or from wherever. So they've got this alignment there. It's hard to imagine that Israel isn't somehow involved in it for that reason. But but the U.S., you know, so that's the big question: is how does the U.S. reconcile with, now that this is now designated as a terrorist group, and everybody now knows that this group is basically Al-Qaeda. We also know that the idea is that you know, the known story is that Al-Qaeda was the one who attacked the United States on 9/11. So that's what the U.S. is. That's what they're from, the frame that they're working from, right? Is Al-Qaeda attacked us. We went to war trying to hunt down Al-Qaeda. But now you've got Israel saying, but yeah, we like Al-Qaeda now because Al-Qaeda is helping us stop Hezbollah and Hamas, and now Syria won't be a place for Iran. So we want that because, of course, Al-Qaeda, this is a Sunni Muslim Islamist organization that is very much against the Shiites. They hate the Iranians. They hate the Shia Muslims, right? They're fully against them. So that would make the hands of Syria would be against Iran, against Hezbollah, against any of the Iranian agendas in the Middle East. And the question then is, what does the U.S. do? Who do they bomb? What do you foresee the U.S. doing?
Well, they asked me the same question in 2014, and my answer was they're just going to bomb everybody because they can. The thing, okay, but more specifically, I think that they have a plan. They want to carve out a state east of the Euphrates River. And they want to destroy Iran and Syria, and they want to overthrow the Syrian government. They've recently stated, the State Department has recently stated that they want to overthrow the Syrian government. So they've essentially redeclared what their intentions are from the State Department document. It's going to be tricky for them because their Kurdish allies are going to be slaughtered by Al-Qaeda, and which are backed by their Turkish allies. So I think that they're going to allow that to happen anywhere that it's west of the Euphrates River, but they're going to try to draw a line east of the Euphrates River. I don't know if that's going to work out for them, but I think that's what they're going to attempt to do. Now, what's a complication for them is the Iraqi, as I said, Popular Mobilization Forces, which they ironically worked with because supposedly the Iraqi government is their ally when they were fighting ISIS. But they also killed the leader of the PMU, and they've been bombing the PMU and in the past. So now that force is going to complicate matters, and they're going to decide again, are they going to side with the Iraqis or are they going to side with Al-Qaeda? And in that case, I think they're going to side with Al-Qaeda because that is what would benefit Israel the most. Because at the end of the day, this is about destroying the resistance axis, and it's about crushing any resistance towards Israel by the by Iran, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, and the Palestinians. This is, at the end of the day, that is the objective. So
really
they will
can't
go with
wait to
whatever that
hear
is.
I can't wait to hear the press conferences, that the U.S. is going to hold, answering these questions of, so who are we backing? And the U.S. State Department having to say, Al Qaeda.
They'll say,
well,
well,
why would we be backing Al Qaeda?
They'll say,
Go
oh, well,
ahead.
we just think Assad should leave. It doesn't matter if Al Qaeda takes over. I think
Right. I mean,
they'll just stick with that line.
right.
But I
We'll
do
stick with
say
the
that the
line of-
Syrian government.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say I do think that this is the opportune moment for the Syrian government to invite the US to leave and give them a timeline, because the heat's already going to be turned up. May as well turn it up a little bit more.
Yeah,
but you're right. It's going to be an interesting press conference.
Yeah, I don't see the U.S. leaving, because I don't see Israel would scream and say, "What are you doing? We need you there. We need you there to back the Al Qaeda rebel fighters and make sure that Assad doesn't grow in power again, because that is what's helping us fight our war against Hezbollah and Hamas and Iran. And you want to stop Iran because you say to everybody in the media that Iran is actually the biggest state sponsor of terrorism and that they're the evil, the axis of evil. And so Iran would be worse than Al Qaeda, according to the narrative. And that's an interesting narrative that I am interested to see them try to convince the American public of, when we've never been attacked by Iran. But we've certainly been attacked by Al Qaeda.
It's not even a hidden narrative. Like, the Israeli Ministry of Defense came out and said, we prefer ISIS to win in Syria over Iran. I mean, it's just open. This was back when ISIS was bombing civilians all over the world, including the UK and the United States. But Israel came out and said, we prefer ISIS. And it sounds like it should be counterintuitive, but at the end of the day, Israel is the Jewish version of ISIS. They are jihadis. They are creating a religious state.
I've never heard that term, but that's a good one. Jihadis?
Yes, I've just coined the term.
Wow.
Essentially, they're driven by a religious zealotry, where they think that they can take over Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Messiah will come and it will lead to the end of the world. And, we want Messiah, and we have to ethnically cleanse anyone who doesn't agree with our religion. And who does that sound like? ISIS. ISIS wanted to ethnically cleanse everyone who isn't their religion in Syria. And they also wanted the apocalypse. They had this apocalyptic doctrine that if they take over Damascus, then Jesus will return and it'll be the end of the world. So we're dealing with a kind of a similar beast. I think that if Israel kind of saw ISIS and Al Qaeda as something that would legitimize it, because they always say, like, look at all these Muslim countries around. There's only one Jewish country right here. Well, actually, those countries aren't Muslim countries. They have their own ethnic groups. Syria has its own history, its own culture. So does Palestine. It's got a very long history that goes way back further than the Bible. They were the first Neolithic farmers. It's like the birthplace of civilization and language. But for Israel, it's just Muslim and Jews, and let them have their Islamic state so we can have our Jewish state. And that's why they see Al Qaeda and ISIS as natural allies in the region. And that's why I'll send it to you, a picture of Al Qaeda and the IDF hanging out on the Golan Heights border, just hanging out.
Unbelievable. Well, it's going to be an interesting next, I guess, chapter in this current war that is widened. As much as they're saying we're trying to stop the widening of the war, well, the war just keeps widening and widening and widening. They're just calling it different little wars, when in reality, it really looks like one big war that is breaking out. They're just trying to paint it like it's smaller wars, smaller regional wars. But in reality, it just seems like one big Middle East war. I love that term.
I think it's World War III.
Well, it certainly seems to look like it's leading towards that, and we'll see what Russia does how much Russia can even help in this. I know they've come out saying that they're still supporting Assad, but they've got their own problems right now, and they're occupied with Ukraine. So, the question is, how much help can Russia actually be at this point? But they certainly don't want to see a spread of terrorism. That is something that they have tried to stop, because they are right there on the border of all of that terrorism. So they have a reason for wanting to stop it for their own national security, the spread of that type of ideology and those caliphates and whatnot. But it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in these next few weeks. Sorry,
Syria is also their only access point to the Mediterranean Sea.
Right, that's right.
But I'm glad you like my jihadi term.
I love that term. Yep, because it really does distinguish. It's like, with the Islamists, right? There's the jihad, there's the real radical, Islamist sections like Al-Qaeda, Taliban, but of course the vast majority of Muslims are not jihadists in that. It depends on how you use that term, right? But they're not caliphate driven. I don't know if I can say that, though, about the majority of Jews. Unfortunately, I do think that there is a that has been taught and burned into the brains. It seems like the majority of Jewish people do want to see their Zionist home. They do want their caliphate essentially in the Middle East.
Yes.
So I don't know. I think that the majority of Muslims don't really have that idea. And it's a very vocal, strong, obviously militarized minority of the Muslims, and they're very dangerous and extremely scary, and it's terrifying. But I don't know if, but nonetheless, the term jihadi, and maybe we could get many Jews to rethink it when they realize, like, wait a minute, am I a jihadi? I don't want to be. I want to be, I want to be a moderate. I don't want to be a radical. Right. I want to be a moderate Muslim, not a radical. It's kind of the same sort of way of thinking. I don't know. Like, maybe it would help. Maybe it would help with some of the deprogramming, because it does need to happen. That is for sure.
Absolutely.
Syrian girl,
and
where
it wasn't
can
always
people
this
find
way.
you? No, it wasn't always this way.
Coffee. Follow me.